Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the Community Spotlight. Every once in a while, instead of having a vote, we'll showcase a game that deserves a spotlight. And tonight, we're going to be having a Disability Awareness Month tie-in with Tales of Xillia Jude being run by Transkina. As a reminder, throughout the month of October, we'll be featuring speedruns by disabled speedrunners to help promote able gamers and just awareness for disabled runners in general. As a reminder, if you'd like to run a game as part of Disability Month, just type out !Disability Month in chat. Beyond that, we have a few quick announcements to go over. Game schedule for AGDQ 2020 will be out on the 16th. And make sure you tune in tomorrow for Random Number Generator at 8 p.m. Eastern, a new show about randomizers with Skybills. So before we get started, why don't the three of you introduce yourselves so people can get used to your voices?
We can start with you, Trans.
Hello, everyone. My name is Transkina, and I am going to be running Tales of Xillia any % Jude tonight for all you people.
Hey, I'm Gedrith, one of the members of the Tales of speedruns community, help put together the marathon, and here assisting Trans like I have before in the past.
And I'm Devomstu. I'm also another Tales of speedrunner. I actually do run this game, although only the other ending, so we'll have Trance as the main expert on Jude's side for sure. And yes, I will also be assisting in the commentary as much as I'm able to.
So why don't you give us the quick overview? What can we expect to see in this speedrun for people who've never seen it before?
Well, this RPG is actually kind of unique in that when you start the game allows you to choose one of two protagonists to play the game, to play from the perspective from as you play the game. One character is the male main character, Jude, and the other is the female main character, Mila. Up until this year, pretty much the only Tales of Xillia speedruns were done on the Mila side of the story for a number of reasons that I'll get into during the run, but actually routed the Jude category, and I'm proud to say that I have completed Jude.
You are cutting out a small amount there, Kina. If you could drag your sensitivity down a little bit, that might fix it before we get started.
On a minute.
No problem.
How's this?
Say it again.
How's that?
Better.
Also, I feel like I should interject and say we need another hour on the estimate on stream.
Oh, right. I did not
3:30.
update that properly. My apologies.
Did they put 2 hours and 40 minutes?
That is
Oh
completely
yeah, it's
my
actually
fault. Sorry about
2:30 right now.
I didn't realize we were doing New Game Plus.
that. Sorry about that.
I was coming prepared for the completely wrong category.
The estimate I submitted was 340.
Yeah, I updated it now. Sorry about that. That was my mistake. Is there anything else you'd like to cover before we get started?
No, I've basically gone into the basics, and you'll get the full detail as we go along with the run. So let's get started, everyone.
All right, give me a countdown. I'm excited.
All right, we're starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. So as I said, this is Tales of Xillia any % Jude, so obviously the first thing I have to do is select Jude, or else the run is dead.
Okay, let's go.
Obstacle passed. So Jude is an honors student. He went to medical school in Fenmont, and he's off to talk to his professor about, I don't even remember. But basically, his professor has been given some sort of promotion invited to a research lab city.
Yeah, I think he won an extremely prestigious prize, which is
Won the
close
house
enough
prize.
anyway. Yeah, that's it.
So if you were playing Mila side, you would actually skip all of this. You would actually start inside the lab. But on Jude's side, one of the first things that makes the run longer is the fact that you have to play through this intro, which is really just running around.
Yeah, so not only does Jude have a lot of extra content compared to Mila's, we see a lot more. We see a focus more on his side of the story. So anytime that Mila and Jude have a branch off, we'll see only the Jude side of things, which is a big difference coming later on in the run. But right now, and about, I think it's around the 2.5 minute mark, is where a lot of the extra content for Jude actually kicks in.
Anyone here has played Star Ocean: The Second Story, which I'm actually playing casually on my stream right now. Oops, self-promotion. That game is similar to Tales of Xillia in that they allow you to choose the protagonist, Claude or Rena. I don't know of any other games that do that.
Today. I'll never forget how stunned I was when I arrived at Fenmont and saw the...
There's been a few coming up in recent history, like one of the bigger ones to note is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, even though a lot of people don't like the franchise, they've started recently doing that as well. But coming up here is where we're going to finally get our run-in with Mila and start Jude down the great epic that is this game.
Well, one of the first things to note is that if you were playing as Mila, she would actually be very overpowered right now, and she would be able to one-shot these first few fights very quickly. But Jude is not overpowered, and so these fights are going to be a little bit slower. Also,
yeah, oh, go ahead.
In this run. Got it. If you were Mila, you would be able to just cast Undine on those enemies and beat them in like 3 seconds.
Yeah, so...
But as Jude, just Demon's Fists them, which takes like 10 extra seconds.
Yeah, so Mila gets to start with 4 Summon Spirits, which are very common in all Tales of games. Ifrit, Undine, Sylph, and Gnome. She will probably lose them in a little bit, but during this beginning part with Mila, it's pretty tedious encounters, nothing too big. But one thing that you know so far is at the beginning of these combats so far, tutorials pop up. Well, that actually happens throughout the games until you get through all the tutorials. So actually getting extra encounters is really bad if you know you have a tutorial coming up.
It's also really, really bad if you accidentally say yes to one of them, so don't do that. I mean, not on a huge
The worst one is
scale
about
for a
to come
marathon
up.
run.
Alright, so first we have our first quote-unquote boss. Not really a boss. On Mila's side, you would just do the second phase, but since we're doing Jude, we have to die to this boss, which can either go very fast or very slow.
What's going on? Why are you doing this?
So, that went pretty well. So now, Mila joins the party, and now I'm just going to switch to Mila and using Bean.
So that fight is actually winnable if you want to attempt it. It just takes a while.
And casually, it's very difficult.
Yeah, when I first played this game, I actually reset it so many times to beat that fight. You get so much experience.
A new game plus thing.
You are correct. The Lord of Fire.
You don't even get like any extra reward. I think you get like the same amount of experience that you get from the second phase.
You get a little bit more, but that's about it. I think it was like maybe 200 more.
This is a special occasion, so I'm actually gonna do this. Do I have it?
Oh boy.
Ooh, hold on.
So this is what he's currently going through is a big thing that stands out for this Tales of game compared to all the others is the Lilium orb system. So it's effectively a skill tree in which when you put points into the orbs, it increases certain stats. But if you complete grids, like you saw earlier with Jude, you actually start unlocking abilities to put onto people.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you have probably played Final Fantasy X and are familiar with its sphere grid. This is very similar to the sphere grid in Final Fantasy X, except instead of there being one sphere grid shared by all the characters, each character has their own Lilium Orb. And they each have like their own skills and arts that only they can learn. But it's essentially the same thing in which you get to choose which stats you improve and which arts and skills you learn. Ooh, almost got caught there.
Yeah, you can do it manually for the whole game, but thankfully, once we get past the super early game, we don't have to anymore. The strategies end up being like loose enough that we can just start using the autofill, where you press, I think it is a select button, and it'll just choose the nodes that it wants to fill in based on like what's generally considered to be good for that character, and it makes pretty good decision for the most part.
So one of the reasons why I picked these costumes is that they have a unique feature where instead of getting the normal battle music, you get whatever game it came from. You get to hear much of it though. So as you may have noticed from that fight, Mila is no longer overpowered. We cannot use Undine anymore. In one of those cutscenes we skipped, she lost her 4 great spirits, and so now she can't even wield a sword. So I just had to use Windblade. Nope, I learned recently that even though it's the same distance to walk from around that...
The Sea Haven is on the opposite side of the city from here. We need to go towards the central plaza first. We can only get after crossing.
Yeah, we didn't get any of that about talking about the distance. So I assume that he's going to say something about the left side being faster than the right, which would make...
We appear to be having some Discord issues with Trance. Hopefully we will get Trance back here shortly. But the stream is still running, so...
Yeah, that's good. So, now's a good time to talk about it. So, we have Mila and Jude unlocked, and we're using them. So they both have... So every character in this game has unique abilities that are built into the core gameplay for the character. So Jude's is, if you dodge the second an attack is about to hit you, you actually snap pivot and come right behind whoever you're attacking, which is very useful for several one-on-one boss fights that Jude's gonna have to fight. Mila's is, she has her abilities, which also can be used as spells. If you hold down the button, she'll cast as a spell. If you just hit it, she'll throw it out as a move instead.
Yeah, a couple of them are really useful, and a couple of them are not as useful. We generally just use the wind one, Windblade, and the fire one, Fireball. Although the Fireball is a bit disruptive because it knocks enemies down, so you only want to use it in certain controlled scenarios. And
also,
otherwise you're just going to spam Windblade.
Yeah, and also if you really like Fireball, wait until about midway through this, no, an hour into this run, and then you're gonna really like Fireball.
Or really hate it. Probably bits of both.
Yeah. So we also just unlocked our third-party member, Alvin. He's okay. He's a good heavy hitter and tank, but we don't rely on him too heavily for the run.
We are on Jude's story. We have to use him a bit more than you would on Mila. On Mila, you almost never give him any Lilium point after the very start of the game. On Jude, you have to do a little bit more. But we'll get to that point quite a bit later in the run, and I'm sure Trance will back that in and be able to explain it. What will happen at that point?
So, Xillia and Graces are two of the first Tales games that do what you currently see. We don't really have a world map anymore. Now we just kind of have extended dungeon areas for our fields. So most areas are between 3 to 4 in length to get from one destination to another. And then all the units are out on the field, and like I said earlier, we want to avoid them, mostly in the fact of the tutorial messages. We don't really get too much experience from mobs in this game, so you don't really need them at all for experience. And the bosses give a lot of experience in this game.
Yeah, we're not like there is a reason why the boss experience is so busted, but we'll be getting to that later, and it is something that we should explain when it actually comes.
So what you saw there is called link arts. So a big thing in this game is the link system. As you can see, there's a tether between Mila and Jude right now during combat. When you get a full gauge on the left side, or when you're doing certain moves and you're trying to hit the next stage, a little orb's gonna pop up after that move with the character that you're linked with. And it's only specific moves. And when you hit R2 on the controller, it will trigger a link art with each other. When you have a full gauge and you activate, I forgot the actual name of the ability, but it lets you pretty much just constantly do link arts for, I think, roughly 15 seconds.
Yeah, it's dependent on which ones you use. If you keep using the same ones over and over, then you won't get as many out. But if you are able to chain them together, which is basically just keep using different ones in a row, you can get out maybe 8 or 9 if you're really pushing it, or more realistically, somewhere around 5 to 7. Which is a lot of damage, because link arts do way more damage than any single art.
Yeah, well, you'll be seeing them quite a bit in this run. Oh, another thing to mention, so when you're in the link up, every character has a special ability that you're sub to for the player character. If it was Mila as the sub character, she actually binds enemies in place. I believe Jude removes status effects, like a percent or something. It's a percent chance.
Jude's ability is actually slightly more interesting than that. It's if you get knocked to the ground, then what will happen is that Jude will come over and Jude will come over and bring you back up and heal a bit of your health, and it's not all that apparent yet, but every time your partner's support ability activates, you get a bit on your link gauge, so you can actually deliberately get yourself knocked down, or at least deliberately not air recover to build up your link gauge on certain fights. Well, one particular fight, but that's not until an hour into.
Alright, we might have Trance back. Hello? Looks like their Discord might still be broken.
We are still going through the slow part, thankfully.
Yeah, looks like we're gonna try and fix this real quick. So sorry about the delay, everyone, but we
am I back?
Yes, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was really trying to avoid having to pause.
No problem.
But I think Gedrith and DeBomb kind of covered most of it. Basically, the unique feature of this Tales game and its sequel is the linked art system, in that there's a gauge at the left side of the screen. As two characters are linked together, that gauge fills up, and when the link gauge reaches certain thresholds, you can use a linked art by activating a certain art while linked with a certain character, and then when the link gauge is completely full, you go into overlimit, which allows you to use an unlimited amount of linked arts until the gauge depletes, and you can actually chain, provided that the linked arts in the chain are different. Also, a number of other things that the link system affects, as you'll see going through the game. Has is linked skills, where each character, when linked with you, can randomly do a partner skill. Like, if you're linked with Jude, he can, when they get knocked down, link with Mila, she can like trap them in like a bind. And Alvin's link skill is guard break, which can break an enemy's guard.
Yeah, the skills do have ways to activate them, but some of them can seem very random, especially Mila's. Like Mila's, you can sort of get an idea of when it might happen, but it's nowhere near as predictable as, say, Alvin's, which is always when the enemy is guarding, or Jude, which is always when you get knocked down.
So, we're on our way to Mila's shrine because she lost the 4 great spirits, and so we're going to try to bring them back by going to the shrine. Also, something you've noticed me doing is I'm picking up these bags and like shining points as I go through the fields. These bags and shining points have something called materials. This game has a very unique shop system where, unlike most RPGs where every city has its own shop inventory, the shop inventory for all the shops in this game are universal. So any shop you visit is going to have the same inventory. The way it works is you have to level up the shops to get more items to become available. And do it. One way is to buy items from that shop. Another is to donate gold. And the third way, which is what you're going to be seeing me do throughout the run, is donating these materials, which each material is worth a certain number of points, and each shop has a random shop multiplier where a material will get more points for that shop than others.
So you see, like, Trance is kind of doing strange route movements. Well, all the pathing for the AI is actually dependent on the monster mob. So some of them will walk in a straight line to your last known destination. Some are really slow, like these Tauruses that you can easily outmaneuver. But then you'll have some that will trace against you pretty fast, or run through trees that that Taurus did there for a second. So it's very easy to be able to move around them and get out of the way.
Yeah, he needs to be gathering all these materials because, as you might be able to predict, giving materials to shops is by far the most efficient way to level them up, not just in the speedrun but also in casual play. And early on you get... there are basically no or very few gear upgrades and chests, so you have to level up your shops a certain amount to be able to actually buy the stuff you...
Actually, no weapon that you can obtain from chests. There are a few that you can obtain doing like Coliseum, and then there's the 6 Devil's Arms, but obviously those are side quests that we're not going to do.
Yeah, this whole game is very dependent that you actually upgrade the shops, because you won't, as Strand said, you just won't get weapon, and most of the armor drops even don't really happen.
The one flaw with this system is that where the materials are and what they have is completely random. So sometimes you'll get some really good materials, but other times you'll get something called jet black feathers, which in casual play can unlock a cool side quest, but in speedruns are completely useless. You can also get gold from them. Aren't totally useless because you can use gold to get more items.
Yeah, the jet black feathers have a niche application in a very obscure run called No Lilium Orb, which is an absolute disaster because when you don't use the Lilium Orb, you basically don't get any stats whatsoever past your base stat.
You have to use all those like stat boosting items, like those herbs.
Well, not necessarily herbs, but you really need to farm jet black feathers to stock up on the Omega elixirs, which you can buy with Feathers Unlimited.
I've never even heard of that category.
Well, yeah, it's not really someone that's done it as a speedrun.
Yeah, it's a meme.
But it is a prominent challenge run, I guess. It's like the level 1 challenge of this game.
Even then, it's limited because some characters like just join your party with certain nodes and arts activated. Rowen actually joins the party with Fireball, so you still have it.
Yeah, thankfully. I mean, thankfully or not thankfully, that doesn't actually get you too far because you get your last party member pretty early in this game compared to some other JRPGs.
Actually going to take a quick save before a few bosses, just in case a certain character gets killed just before the final hit. Because it could be really bad if a character misses experience in these early fights.
Yeah,
Just don't want to deal with it, so if that happens, I'll just retry the fight.
everything is super cutthroat in early game for both this story and Mila's story. If anything, we're actually in pretty much the longest part of the run, which is the same between the two stories. Or maybe about even with another part. But it's a fairly similar route to what you do on Mila's side, and it is very cutthroat. First actual boss, though, is this greater demon, which is kind of aquatic mob, and you actually start off with a full link gauge, so you can just kind of deal, I think, pretty much half of his health in, well, not quite half, but like at least a third of his health in one link art chain, and then you just have to kind of farm up your link gauge using a pair of Jude and Alvin in order to do more link arts to actually do the damage that you need to finish. Because if you look out for the actual damage numbers that he's doing outside of the link art, it is very, very low, and then the link art will suddenly hit quite hard. So this strategy generally involves using Jude's OP basic attack, which is like you hold the left bumper and you attack, and it builds link gauge faster than the other reliable method, and you also pair with Alvin to abuse the whole Alvin guard breaking the enemy, giving you link gauge thing.
Yeah, and
Also, this boss is weak to fire, so that's why we used Mila's fireball and aerial fire.
And that's how we do it.
For link darts.
well, and while not apparent on this boss, going back to what the bomb suit was saying about Jude's, I think it's his free run attack. It actually has a lot of hit stun on it too, against enemies that can actually be staggered, which you'll see in a little while later on the fight that got me not into learning this run anymore, but now it's a lot better.
When did you actually try to learn this game?
4 years ago at this point? It was around the time of
the strategy for the fight is a lot more optimized.
Yeah, when I was looking at learning this run, Freddy still ran this game. That's how long ago.
I remember watching the Zhao fight in those old runs. It was awful.
Yeah, it's not good. So since Trent's already brought up the name, so Zhao is the make or break for this game. If you feel like picking this up at any point, just follow the route till you get the Zhao and see if you can stand the boss. It's just a crazy moment. It gets very hectic.
Yeah,
But
even
ironically,
now you have to learn it properly.
But
Yeah.
ironically, back in the last time this run's been into a major marathon was Limit Break 2015, what was done as a co-op. And ironically, during that process, they found out that Elise can actually have an infinite.
This must be one of the temporal
I still always think that's a little funny thing I learned from Ghoul.
So here we're just collecting elemental stones, which Mila wants to use to bring back the 4.
Yeah, she thinks that grabbing these elemental stones are gonna help her restore her power so she can be back to being the Maxwell, which, for people that are Tales of Symphonia fans, Maxwell might sound very familiar. Maxwell is in the Tales of universe is pretty much considered the Lord of the Summon Spirits, effectively.
Spirits, yeah. And Mila,
And so Mila
is claiming to be the human incarnation of Maxwell.
So now we're right. So that was the whole first part. It was pretty much right into her village, and now we're riding up to where her shrine is, so she can do the ceremony to get the summon spirits back.
Also, have I told you how much I hate butterflies?
Butterflies?
Butterflies, they're the worst. They have the most ridiculous hitboxes I've ever seen.
I don't think they ever programmed butterflies and fairies properly in Tales of games.
You could literally not even be touching one of those like butterflies and still get an encounter. Also picking up a few extra items, chests for safety, just so I can sell them and get a few extra life bottles. If it was a serious PB attempt, I wouldn't be picking them up, but this is a marathon, so...
Safety is very important in most Tales of runs.
It's not even a marathon, it's just a community run, I guess.
Yeah. But I mean, still, it's safety is a big thing for Tales of runs because a lot of our runs are very volatile. I mean, not all of them are as refined as for the instance of this is Symphonia. Like Symphonia has a huge community, people that have dedicated years to round out this game. That's why they don't pick up any extra stuff anymore. But a lot of these other games either haven't been optimized fully or literally just quite can't, as in the case of Tales of Graces F. So a lot of these side items have been figured out for marathon safety reasons.
Unfortunate thing about this game is that if you die on a boss, they let you retry it, so you don't need to do as many safety saves. I'm only doing a few on critical fights where if a character dies just before the last hit, they'll miss experience and won't learn a certain ability that I really need for another boss.
So when you say it lets you do a retry, is that like you get any resources you spent back kind of retry?
Well, the game, if you choose the retry option, the game puts you back in the menu. So if you died because you made a menu mistake, you can actually fix it.
Yeah, it resets all your values. And,
I believe it gives you back all your items too.
Yeah, I think it even goes down to saving your HP and TP states going into the fight.
Which that's one thing I didn't get into. This game has something called the auto item feature. Like in older Tales games, to use items, you had to always go into the menu and use them manually. This game, if you ever... you're probably familiar with its Gambit system. The auto item feature is kind of similar to that in that you can set your AI characters to use when certain conditions are met. You can set the priority in which they'll use items. If more than one condition is met, you can set what those conditions are. You can set... You can use, like, once... You could say that if you only have 2 left, they have to stop.
So, going back to the story, needless to say, needless to say, we took the stones up there, and nothing happened. Mila's still pretty much the same. Actually, just pretty much the stones.
One thing did happen. We met the worst character in the game.
I was trying to avoid that, but yes, we meet one of the worst characters in this game. I don't even, like, he's so bad I don't even actually remember his name.
You'll see him later. Anyways, what you just saw me do is a map warp. This game, since it doesn't have a world map, you don't get any, like, flying vehicle to locations at any point. Instead, at this point in the game, they allow you to use the map to instantly teleport to any location you've been to, which is pretty convenient.
Yeah, if we were
in this system, because when a location gets registered onto your map, it's whenever you've been there for the first time. So, like, even if you're on your way back to a certain area that normally you're supposed to, like, go through, like, a map screen, but that map screen is attached to that area, you can actually skip the area completely in Map Warp, which you'll see me do a few times.
Yeah, if we were playing, what's the category name? Is it New Game Plus? Do you remember the category name we gave for the map? Glitch? Yeah,
I don't even know
Glitch
that.
New Game Plus. So, pretty much when you start the game, in New Game Plus, you have, like in every Tales of game, you have the option turning on specific grade shop items, and one of them is map knowledge. Well, there's a funny glitch when you do that of you can just fast travel to certain locations after you unlock the map. So you can skip some cutscene flags by just going over to where you're supposed to be going, and then just coming back out, hitting the flag, whatever boss, then coming back in. So it cuts down the travel time by a lot, and I think it's saying like it's a 2-hour category at that point.
Yeah, that one isn't actually quite like intended like that. They don't intentionally let you carry over map glitch, but with map data, but with an extremely easy to perform glitch, you can start basically a new game plus with your map data, and you can actually quick travel immediately as well. Like you don't have to wait for it to be naturally unlocked. So you basically jump between all the necessary cutscene triggers by continuously quick jumping instead of having to actually walk and search. And that ends up as an hour and a half, while doing just a new game plus without the glitch takes closer to 2.5.
So what I'm doing right now is actually very important for the speedrun. I'm doing what is called a subquest, which is basically like a side quest. And the subquest that I just started actually lets you get a very good material that is worth a lot of shot points, which I will be using later. And that was one of the cutscene triggers for it.
Yeah, quite a few of the side quests are pretty time limited. If you skip one of the triggers by accident, you sometimes just can't recover at all. That's not to say that the run becomes completely impossible, but any kind of PV attempt would be dead at that point if you did miss it.
So coming up now, I'm actually going to pick up a food item, which is one of the most this game. Food in Tales of Xillia works differently than earlier Tales games, where you had to buy like multiple ingredients and then cook after each fight and just hope that it would work. In this game, you buy like a package of, as I obtained from the chest, just get a package of food, and it lasts for a certain number of battles when used from the menu.
Never actually been in the deep wood before.
That to actually boost the amount of experience you earn from battles, which is how we earn extra experience from boss fights. To get the cutest party member.
Yeah, so now we have Elise, who's our main spellcaster and pretty much healer. We'll get our true powerhouse of a caster in a little while longer. So Elisa's special ability when you're tagged up with her is she uses her little pet doll Tipo, and she loves to say the one line that is pretty much a meme for this whole game. Sharing is caring. She will use Tipo to steal TP from the enemy and give it back to your character that controls it.
Amazing, Elise.
Yeah, and you can reliably activate sharing as caring against an enemy that is currently on the ground themselves, like how Jude's partner skill activates when you're on the ground. Sharing as caring will pretty reliably activate when you knock down an enemy, so we get to make use of that on the jail fight coming up, which will be explained with.
So since we're here and Jail's coming up, it is a pretty good time to bring up the co-op run that happened back at Limit Break. So, as I mentioned earlier, this used to be a very difficult fight coming up, but the co-op run found a unique thing with Elise, that apparently her neutral attack hit the wolves in this next fight in such a way that they actually were perfect for an infinite. And her being able to do that and lock down one of the bosses made the fight apparently infinitely easier, and it became like one of the easiest fights for the whole run.
But yes, like we said earlier, this is the make or break fight for when you learn the game. Even with the new, much more reliable strategy, there's still a big learning curve to make sure you can actually execute the strat properly. And so this fight does unfortunately make a lot of people quit trying to run the game.
Yeah, so ideally, casually, you're around like level 15 to 20 when you get into this fight. I think we're, what, 7, 8 for this fight?
Yeah, we're somewhere between level 4, 5, 6, 7 kind of area. Like, at least Joyce
And I
level
hate
7,
wolves. I hate wolves.
Wolves are the worst. Wolves are one of the fastest field animals in this game.
There's also a lot of very linear maps in this game where it's very hard to dodge encounters. You have to like outmaneuver them. Sometimes you have to run in a circle.
So yeah, and all these spawns outside of like a few set little pieces are actually RNG what spawns into that location. So you can kind of get screwed over in some positions, like with the plant right there. So coming right up here is going to be the fight. So he's triggering the rice, which is a nice buff to have going in. And then he's going to do one big menu for more Lilium orbs. So a nice thing about Lilium orbs is if you have a big area already primed and you finish it off, you just get everything at once. And there's also the auto. So quickly there you saw the skill menus. That's what we get from the Lilium Orb tree. So we actually have to manually go in and turn on those skills because every character has a set number of skill points that they can actually use on themselves. And then this menuing is pretty much controlling the AI to do certain things. So we don't want them to use linking because we want to have the full power over that. And we don't want them to use linked arcs because once again, we want to have all control over that as well.
Yeah.
Also, you saw
the auto item.
He also menued on there, instead of Fireball, he overwrote with Splash. So Splash is one of Mila's best spells because it has a lot of hit stun to it, and it multi-hits, as well as have a decent area that it covers, which is going to be very nice for this fight.
Time for the fight itself, and so you pair with Elise, and you try to basically infinitely combo Zhao himself after starting things off by using up your Lick Gauge. Clear as much as you can. With your Link Gauge, you want to be paired with Mila because Zhao is weak to wind, and about the only strong wind move you have is your link part with Mila's Wind Blade, which is called Final Gale. But then you pair with Elise for when you don't have any Link Gauge available, and you just try to infinite him by using the left bumper attack into a Soaring Vortex, which knocks him down. Hopefully, then
The idea is to get them into like get him in a stun. However, this game has something called Iron Stance on all the bosses, where when you see that blue exclamation mark appear, break out of your combo and just attack.
And Zhao, more likely than not, does his Earth Shatter, which is the one that you see there when he hits the ground with his hammer and pretty much a giant fissure comes out. A lot of his abilities can 2 to even sometimes one-shot some of the characters. So keeping him stunned is a very important thing, and this is why this is such an improvement over the old strat, because the old strat was pretty much just effectively praying that he didn't break out and just punch you in the face and kill you.
Also, we're basically hoping that Mila and Alvin target the wolves and not Zhao, because we don't need them to target Zhao. Jude has that handled, but they're not doing that good a job.
Yeah, when they target Zhao, it builds up Zhao's iron stance a lot faster.
And I've kind of lost my stun, but I picked up some extra life bottles, so I think we'll be okay.
Yeah,
Zhao is nearly dead.
Absolutely have to guard that Devil's Maul, or else you're dead.
As you can see with Elise so far, with the 3 times that she's died from it.
Once Zhao's dead, the fight is normally won, although I guess you can technically get picked off by a wolf, but it's just very unlikely.
That was a good Zhao.
It was. For a marathon run, or for any kind of no reset run, and even just in general, that is a very good fight.
Yeah, he behaved pretty well. So one of the big abilities...
Route and strats I'm using.
Yeah, it can go to around 130, which would be a very good run, which would be a very good time for a single segment run, but for no reset in this kind of...
Yeah, especially with...
plan.
Yeah, especially with both Jude and Elise going down at the same time, that was probably a majority of the time loss between your PB and that. So now that we're done, we're going up to the next village, in which this is where we will get our next teammate, the old man, as I like to call him, Owen. And wait, Owen, right? Or am I thinking a different game?
Rowen.
Rowen.
You missed an R.
Man, yeah. Me and names today, they're not doing good. It's a Monday. But he has our favorite move for the rest of this run, Fireball. his fireball is so good that it's better to cast fireball against flame-resistant enemies than any other move he has in the game.
I got a question for chat. Which do you think is better, Paraball or Fireball?
I mean, people who went to RPG Love Break are going to say Paraball because that was a giant meme.
Yeah, you can't ask me that knowing that I'm extremely biased.
Yeah, I mean, if Xillia does get into another big marathon soon, you might be able to revive the fireball, but right now the fireball may be probably too strong.
Especially with K. Shiro doing it in the voice.
Paraball!
Yeah.
Her and Kirby, they make it. So yeah, now it's just right now we're kind of just running around talking to a lot of people, and that's really it. I think story-wise, it's pretty much there's a lot of kind of conflict going on within the Empire right now, and Jude and Mila are trying to figure out how they can possibly help. And right now, it's gonna help. They're looking at helping Rowen and the lady he helps attend to with some minor errands.
Yeah, Rowen appears to be just a butler, but he's actually...
Uh-oh, did we lose Trance again?
Well, I think just cut out in the middle of the sentence. Or...
Well, what he was going to say is Rowan's a powerful mage. A very powerful mage.
And actually a retired, like, military general, basically.
Yeah. And I think...
He's a former military general.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm still here.
Yeah, you're
I
back.
think it's also alluded that he was possibly an assassin for a time, but they never verified that or not.
Alright, that was the last of the tutorial skips.
So here's our favorite spell in action. So Rowen also starts with a skill called Rhythm, which is very common for all the Tales of games from the main caster. So pretty much during the casting animation, if Trance keeps hitting the circle button, he can actually add more fireballs to the attack.
They call it art tuning, but yeah, basically each art that Rowen can get has like a certain thing that you can enhance it. And in the case of Fireball, you can press circle up to like 4 times and shoot out up to 4 fireballs. Fireball is broken for a number of reasons, one of which is it homes. This game is... We actually played this run on semi-auto for a number of reasons, and one of the reasons is because of the auto-aim feature, where every time Rowen finishes casting a spell, he will immediately face the enemy wherever they are, cast the fireball directly in their path. And also, how broken Burn is in this game. Burn is a very OP status effect. All bosses are vulnerable to it, including the final boss. It basically gradually certain percentage of their max HP. So the more HP they have, the more damage they'll take. And in certain boss fights where bosses link up, bosses gets inflicted with Burn. The other boss will be inflicted with Burn as well. Which is actually one of the things that I haven't gotten into regarding the link system. When 2 characters are linked, they actually share status effects, positive and negative. So if you get like a attack buff or a magic buff, your party member will also get that buff. At a very bad status effect, like Burn or Art Seal, will also get that status effect. Also, if you're linked and you take damage, your linked partner takes, I think, 25% of the damage you took. Most cases is not terrible, but as we'll see later, when bosses start to use Mystic Arts, some attacks do just so much damage that it can kill both you and your link partner if you are linked. And healing works the same way as damage, where if a party member item or a spell, their link partner, I think it's healed by 25% of the amount.
Yeah, and not only that, you also, whenever, like we said, the burn gets shared, but whenever they take damage from their burn, that is damage that also gets shared. So you get, every time a burn proc happens, both enemies get hit for the full amount, and then they also both get hit for the amount shared from their partner, and that damage can get absolutely ridiculous on certain fights and make or break whether you get a fast fight or not. If you can get a link burn.
That comes a bit later.
Yeah, you don't have to deal with any dual bosses for quite a while.
Also,
For better or for worse.
I'd like to talk about one other thing. This game has this ridiculous thing where in order to climb or jump off something, you have to basically be frame perfectly facing where you want to climb or jump when you press X. If you are not framed perfectly when you're pressing X, you won't climb or jump, and that can be really bad because you can get back attacked.
You doing okay there?
It's not fun. It's a big time loss if you get back attacked because you weren't able to climb or jump at the right time.
Yeah, they realized their mistake, and in Xillia 2 you can buffer the climbs or jumps by just holding the button as you run up to the edge.
We're full health, so we'll just quick save.
Xillia 1 we have to deal with the mess that is having to manually buffer, or having to manually press the button in time.
So this is a very important boss coming up. It's I believe it's called Unknown Entity. Anomaly. But it's a flying boss. And as anybody that's well aware of Tales of games, flying bosses usually don't go very well. This boss really likes to be outside of a lot of melee ranges. But Splash is a great ability to possibly get knocked down.
This boss has two really bad spells you can cast. He was almost about to cast one, and I was prepared to Magic Guard it. Not Magic Guard, but since it's a marathon, I did anyway. The Shimmering Bolt, if he hits somebody with it, it pretty much one-shots them, and it puts you in a really bad spot. This is the other bad spell you can use. Luckily, I think Mila and Rowen have wind resistance.
Yeah, the other spell he casts is Light Element, and hurts really hard, and even if a character does survive it, they can get confused.
I need to see something.
Start attacking their teammates.
Had to do that. Jude absolutely needs experience.
Oh yeah, you're low on life bottles.
I ran out.
Yeah, I don't want to like talk about the route which I don't know properly. Do you still shop in the city that you just were in on this route, or do you save it for later?
I bought orange gels there, but I had like 7 life bottles for safety, and I used all of them.
Yeah.
You can pick up another one on the way to Porkandala, though.
Yeah,
but I had to use one of my.
About to reach another divergence in the route between Jude and Mila, at least.
This is actually a pretty major divergence, not just in where you go, but actually how much experience you get.
Yeah, so pretty much coming up, Mila and Jude are about to get separated. Jude's gonna keep all the boys. Mila has all the girls when it happens, and Mila and the girls get captured by the Imperial Army and taken to the fort. And so the guys have to team up and go and try to save them. Yeah, so the guys have a whole field to get through, and then sneaking into the dungeon and going through. The girls they start in the fort, and they just have to get out and have one pretty brief boss fight. That's not a huge thing.
Yeah, more to the point, I think Trance kind of cut out when he was saying it, but there is a big gap in the experience you get between the two stories, which makes a fairly significant difference on the next few fights after the fort.
Yeah, so basically, since you have to fight those battles with Mila alone, the game decided to make each of the enemies she has to kill worth 800 experience, which if you use a beef bowl is worth 1200 experience. However, since Jude gets a full party of 3, more enemies, the game only gives you like 80 experience for the 2 fights he does, which leaves Jude severely underleveled compared to Mila for the next 2 bosses.
Yeah, they expected anybody that's on the Jude story to still try to encounter a lot of stuff during your run over to the fort, but we're speedrunners, we don't want to do that.
Luckily, I found a few things that make it a little bit easier, and you'll see in a bit. Up a few items as I go through this path. One is the life bottle I mentioned, and the other is actually a hidden hourglass. Pretty hard to find this early in the game, but there's actually a hole on the screen that has one. Hourglasses are an item in Tales games where, if used during battle, they freeze all the enemies for a certain period of time. Works on bosses just as well as normal enemies. That's where the hourglass is.
This would have been a great secret forward.
So the shop that I'm about to do is a bit different than the one I would do in a Mila speedrun. The thing I do like about the world maps is that they're big enough that it's hard for enemies to catch you. Like, I haven't really had any problems outmaneuvering the enemies on that screen.
I'm not liking this wind. It's messing up my hair.
Yeah, outside of like the actual dungeon, you generally don't have too many problems getting through just world maps and kind of. But the dungeons more than make up for it, to be honest.
So here's the fort, and the first thing you saw when he was walking in was that weird glyph at the entrance for the fort. Well, it doesn't matter to us in this run, but in the Mila run, those actually function as barriers because they have colors on them that I believe story-wise like detonate if they actually cross them.
Yeah, so in the Mila run, he would be giving basically all the experience to the food shop, which is by far the most useful shop because food is just ridiculous in this game. But in this run, with various differences that we've already talked about and then some that will crop up later, you have to actually invest in the weapon shop to a much more substantial degree than you otherwise would in the Mila run.
If this was a Mila run, I actually would have bought 2 beef bowls there. One for the enemies in Fort Gandala and one for the boss fights. But since the enemies here give such little experience, it's just not worth using a food item on them. So instead, I invested the materials that I would have put, some of the materials that I would have put into the food shop, into the weapon shop to buy a new weapon for Jude to try and counter the lack of levels that he's going to have for the next few bosses.
Jude is your main damage dealer when you don't have Rowen.
Was that you were saying? I couldn't hear.
Sorry, I was just saying that Jude is generally your main damage dealer when you don't have Rowen at this point in the game.
Yeah. Whenever you don't have Rowan, you have to use Jude. This is also like the closest thing to a puzzle this Tales game has, where you have to move like these boxes around. You don't even have to do it on the Mila speedrun. On the Jude speedrun, you do have to do it a little bit. Also, I picked up some chests for extra money and materials since I'm going to be needing them to donate.
Yeah, they really cut down on box puzzles in this game actually compared to most Tales of games.
I was actually playing Symphonia casually, and I just remembered how much I hate the Shadow Temple.
I think everybody hates that place.
Yeah,
No,
there
not
are
to the
worse
level
places
of
in the
sewers.
speedrun. Yeah.
Not to the level of sewers that we all just leave the runner there and go use the bathroom during it.
Or well Gaia where everyone takes a short nap. Sometimes including a runner. Although, well Gaia... Well,
Okay.
it's not really relevant to this run, but well Gaia has recently had a new skip discovered.
I think I'm going to die here.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so this is the unfortunate thing with Jude is some of these bosses, I mean, they're going to be hitting a lot harder because of our EXP loss as well. And just being the relative low level that we are going to be for a little while. And these bosses in particular, with their shield, they guard is very often. And it's just... Yeah, I can just go for it. Especially if Jude gets stunned like that during this fight. Stuns are really, really bad in this game. Compared to a lot of other Tales of games. I think it's saying like, is it double damage in this one, and you're out for like 5 seconds?
I'm not sure about the damage, but it is rough because you need to control Rowen to make the fights go at anywhere near an acceptable pace. With how OP Rowen is on manual, he cannot replicate any of that when he's not your control character. His AI just won't do the art tuning at all, or will only do it once. Like send out 2 fireballs instead of 4.
Yeah, there's...
As we get further into the run, I get a few skills for Rowen that make the art tuning a little bit easier. One is cued spellcasting, which basically lets him store a fireball if you've like interrupted it with a guard or casting it, and then you pick up from where you left off with the cast. And another that he's going to get is the conductor skills, one of which prevents him from being staggered while casting the fireballs. Casting and he's taking damage, he'll still be able to cast. He'll still take the damage, but the fireball won't be stopped. This battle is actually a lot easier than the first.
Yeah, there's only 2 of them, there are like 3 in the first battle, plus it makes the melee battle up front 2 on 2 instead of 3.
Very impressive. You too. I believe
And I guess they're also weaker. Well, that's basically the fort over with at this point.
Yeah, so we get Elise back, but Mila's run ahead, so we're supposed to go and catch up with her, but I mean, we need to do some menuing, get some equipment moved around.
I normally don't do that, but because I lost so many life bottles, I need some extra equipment items to sell. And well, what's going to happen is these party members are going to leave, and when they come back, they're going to get brand new equipment. So I actually don't need that equipment anymore. Which it brings one of the problems between the Jude side and the Mila side. Playing on Mila's side, late in the game, all your party members get removed, and they all come back with extremely OP weapons and armor. But if you're playing on Jude's side, party members, and they don't get any equipment upgrades at all.
So we missed a major scene that just happened, and it's a very important one. So during us trying to rescue Mila from the fort, she ends up getting in a fight with the Emperor. And the Emperor, find her, their one-on-one did not go well, and Mila ends up being crippled from the waist down. So Jude is taking it as a personal mission to take her and bring her to his father, who's a well-renowned healer, to help see if he can heal her to walk again.
Another funny thing about playing on Mila's story, you get forced to play as Jude anyway.
Yeah, and It's it can be problematic depending on how little of experience Jude ended up getting, depending on what encounters you get heading over to
It'd be a problem if
the actual
you
town.
play as Jude up to this point,
Yeah.
especially for the next boss. It's terrible both as a character and as a boss.
Yeah. On the Mila side, they've basically got this boss down now. It comes down to whether you can execute it correctly, but on the Jude side, because of the aforementioned underleveledness, it's even harder.
Basically the same strategy, except, I mean, you have a better weapon, but you have a little less HP and less skills to work with. So you're more likely to actually run out of TP, and you may have to use a gel if things don't go so well.
Getting pretty hungry.
So,
Correctly.
How long has it been since
So
I've
to
had
correct
mom's
what's
home-cooked meals?
being said is pretty common in the chat right now, Jude's story is not easier than Mila's. Mila's is a lot easier than Jude's in the speedrun sense. Even casual, really, because Mila just gets a benefit of a lot of extra stuff. Yeah, there's one boss in Mila's that is very hard.
Quite a run killer for Mila speedruns.
In the speedrun, the list of fights that are easier than in Jude's story than Mila's can basically be counted on one hand, while the opposite is a fairly significant laundry list of fights. That being said, it's not like there's anything that's hugely different outside of these next couple.
Are your legs
Apart
okay?
from the actual story
If they start to
divergences,
hurt,
but we'll
just
get
say
to
so.
those
Thank you. I
a
appreciate
bit
it.
later on.
So here's something that can happen with the Lilium Orbs is after you hit a certain point when you unlock the Lilium Orb tree will expand. You can actually cap out the Lilium Orb tree, and you can unlock another one doing so. A second one for every character.
How very odd.
Yeah, and even the
Carry me
speedrun
on
does
your
do
back
that,
like
but it won't
this.
be until around
I
level
can't help
40,
but
which
remember
is
flying
quite a ways
itself.
away. Well, here we go. No need to save for this fight, since you've only got Jude right now, so a retry is basically the same thing as quick saving before it.
So if you guessed who the worst character in the game is, well, here you go. He's actually also a very difficult fight. Even more so in Jude's story, because once again, it said we are under level compared to what we normally are in Mila's. Thankfully, as long as you can keep him in the soaring vortex stun like Trance is doing so far, it's not a horrible fight. But he has a few moves that he can possibly do just to ruin your day, as well as he does have iron will to break out eventually.
Sometimes he can iron stance like just before you do the soaring vortex, and you have like no chance to avoid it.
Yeah, soaring vortex, you are locked into that animation, but you are vulnerable the whole time during it. Also, that was a great Ivor fight. He behaved very well.
I had one iron stance, but I was prepared for it.
Yeah, that is basically the game saying you need to learn how to use Jude's backstep ability, or else you're not winning this fight. Granted, I mean, we only used it a couple of times because of the infinite stun lock, but the way to win that fight casually is to learn how to use his ability.
So we're in Jude's hometown now, so we're gonna have a few cutscenes of him talking to his dad. But we're also gonna get our next character, and our final one that we'll get for the rest of the run, Leia, who is the bow staff user, as people have pointed out in chat, and Jude's pretty much childhood friend. She's also a really, really good healer, as well as she is one of the few that has very potent buffs in this game. Also,
Leia is to single target what Elise is to multi-target, really.
But one thing that we haven't really mentioned much so far is going more in detail with the combat. So the combat system, we have the normal thing for Tales of games. We have an HP and a TP pool. But also, we have another thing added in called the AC. So AC is action charges, or action something. But pretty much you have a certain amount of actions you can do until you hit 0, and then you have to wait to charge back up. Of course, we can get abilities that lets us get more AP depending on certain actions, like or AC, or like dodging, stuff like that. It is possible to set it up so well that you can literally use Leia and fly people to the moon.
So you guys mentioned how Leia and Elise are the healers. Well, it doesn't really matter in the course of the speedrun because we pretty much never actually use them for healing unless you count Elise's Tipo Drain. And although sometimes I might use Elise's arts outside of battle to heal if I don't have the gels for it. But because basically they're just going to be spamming arts later. And pretty much all the healing is going to be done from items.
So pretty much what happened is Jude's dad pretty much effectively refused to actually help Mila. He did what he could with his knowledge, but there's a ore that they could get to make an inhibitor so she could actually use her legs again by channeling mana. But Jude's dad refused to do it because there's a lot of risk to it. But Jude decided to be gung-ho about it and go and get it himself. And it's also going to introduce us to one of the worst mini-games they decided to put in this game. But thankfully we don't do it outside this mine. And it's mining to break walls.
So you're going to see the power of turbo here.
So yeah, this is one of the reasons why turbo controllers have been allowed. The Japanese community likes to allow it because this is just... It's silly.
Murder your hands.
It is possible to get it without turbo if you get like 2.5, but it's very difficult. And get the 2 cycle. You'll always get the 3 cycle, but the 2 cycle without turbo.
Yeah, it's not too bad, but you do kind of have to kill your hands doing it, and it's not really all that like appropriate of something to do over and over and over. Generally, yeah, you need 5 total flashes of the light that comes up. You need it to like change color 5 total times to break the rock, and a human who's not mashing their heart out can generally max out at about 2.5, because you don't actually need it to flash 5 times, it just needs to be...
There's also another one of those really linear dungeons where sometimes an enemy is just standing in your way and there's just nothing you can do. In Forkandala,
you're not super underleveled. Yeah, sorry, go on.
In Forkandala, there are actually a few chests that contain holy bottles, two on both Jude's story and Mila's story. Holy bottles, if you've ever played a Tales game, is something that typically allows you to avoid encounters, although they're not as broken in Xillia as they were in others, because in this game they cause enemies to move away from you and you can still get encounters with them.
Yeah, Xillia is the mark of when they started doing the current nerfing of Holy Bottle, to the point of in Zestiria and Berseria you don't even bother with them anymore. They're just not worth it.
Sometimes they run into it right directly into the path you're going to.
Yeah.
So if I was doing this story, I would have picked up the chest with the holy bottles through here, but since we're so underleveled on Jude's story, it won't even work.
So
whether or not the holy bottles work depends on your level compared to the level of the enemy stored in the monster token.
So you might have saw the exclamation mark that was above the last enemies that Trance ran into. So those are the caution enemies, are just higher level monsters or special ones, depending on some areas. And yeah, at this level, those are gonna really hurt to potentially one-shot some of the characters.
I got another one.
What's causing these earthquakes?
I don't know.
Yeah, so I mentioned the whole tutorial thing earlier. When you don't have any tutorials to go through, you don't have an issue. But I think there's always a case for tutorials if you control a different character or if a new ability has just been activated. Say like, eventually we'll get Mystic Arts in the game. That will cause a tutorial to pop up.
Yeah, just like a lot of other things in this game, you only get Mystic Arts for your Lilium Orb, so with how we are still underleveled at this point in the game. We will be underleveled until around the 2-hour mark, at which point food being so OP actually makes us catch up to where they expect you to be in levels. But for now, we're underleveled, we don't have anything too advanced on our Lilium Orb, and that includes the Mystic Arts, obviously.
Also, before y'all get your hopes up, we don't Mystic Art in this run. It's a loss in DPS. It's pretty much every Tales of run except for
Actually,
Xillia.
in Jude's story, I do use a Mystic Art.
Oh, nice. Oh, well, and also there are mandatory ones in the final boss that have to happen. But
I wasn't even talking about that.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's why I wanted to mention it. But if you do like Mystic Arts a lot in Tales of games, and if you want them in your speedruns, Zestiria and Berseria both have them in there. And Berseria's is silly because of how the game plays
There's
set
some
up.
PC. Let's glitch.
But here's the one boss that we were talking about that's very hard, but is actually going pretty well.
Well, that's the first phase. That's meant to be the easy one, although it can still drag on because of RNG burrows.
So yeah, that burrow ability, when he kind of drills in and out of the ground, that's the ability that you don't want to see, that wastes time, that also really hurts. And can get you stuck.
So I do a little bit of tech there. I actually de-linked with Leia at the end of that fight to get a faster victory cutscene. Basically, for most of the boss fights, all the fanfares cutscenes are fixed, except for this first phase, where it's just a random one you get from encounters, and sometimes you can just get a really long victory cutscene. And if you're linked with Leia in that fight, you get the link cutscene, which is longer than the one you would get if you were not linked. You're also going to be seeing me use a new strat on Hammer Zam.
So yeah,
this
here's the actual fight.
Yeah, so this is something that another runner, Visage, came up with. He was coming up with some strats, and one of the things he found is that try to keep this guy in a stun by like using Soaring Vortex with Leia and then Steel with Jude to knock him back up.
Yeah, Jude and Leia have like at least a couple of shared moves kind of to signify the whole training partners thing, I suppose. Soaring Vortex being the one that you actually see in the speedrun.
So I have an artifact if I need it.
The AI isn't super reliable with Soaring Vortex, but if you can get it going, then this is one of the most effective ways to take care of this guy.
More reliable because I set her to support the rear when linked, so she should usually be right behind him. She was knocked out, so I couldn't execute that link dart.
Yeah,
So,
you want him on the ground as much as possible so he doesn't burrow, basically.
Yeah, and so for the non-Tales of players out there, you're wondering why we're getting reliable Soaring Vortexes after Leia, so you can make shortcuts for each character, so you can force AIs to use certain abilities. So that's what Trance has been doing so far. So yeah, this is the burrow, and yeah, he can even go out of bounds during it. If he wants to, yeah, and if
I hate this ball so much.
If he wants to, he can keep burrowing one after another and just waste time.
And he also has a burrow for his iron stance, which is even better.
Have to guard that or else you're probably dead.
This is going about as you might expect for a Hammerzam. It's not like anything has gone too terribly, but it's dragging on. Whereas if it goes really well, which is very unlikely but possible, it can sometimes be as short as about a minute or to a minute and a half. But this one is more like what you expect to see a lot of the time.
As unfortunate as it is. So yeah, as transmissioned earlier, hourglasses will freeze time temporarily, and that includes even on bosses.
So he's using this to make sure that his link art chain actually connects, which is the majority of his damage.
Wow, we did it.
Actually gotten sub 2 minutes for Jude's story on that fight. For him to cooperate.
So now Mila's back. She can walk again. The whole operation, operation, I guess the best way of putting it, was successful.
Yeah, although, just to make it clear, that one time that she gets up during the fight is a fluke, and then there's immediately like a 2-month time skip or something where she actually heals properly. Once he goes into into his parents' office here, there's basically a time skip. So this isn't a miracle cure where she can walk at full capacity immediately, but the game does gloss over the rest of it so that you don't have to do any more tedious stuff with only Jude.
Thankfully, it is kind to us.
Okay, this should do. My Lilium orb is coming along nicely.
And yes, as I said in chat, we are just about to enter chapter 2.
My Lilium orb is coming
This game is divided into 4 chapters. The first 3 are roughly equal length. The first ends up being longer in the speedrun, but in terms of like duration and casual playthrough, the first generally end up about the same, and the fourth one's a bit shorter. But we've just made it through the first one. And now we have a fairly significant amount of time where we're actually going to have a full party of all 6 characters. With some minor exceptions, but... You get your full party for quite a long time from now on. And at that point, he just basically enhanced the shop a bit more, which puts the food shop about at the point where it would be on Mila's story. Gets the beef bowl, so for boost experience, and moves on to the start of the gameplay of chapter 2. There you go. All your characters will now get leveled up to the level that Leia was at, basically. And Leia ended up at about level 17 at the end of that boss fight, so all your other characters will end up at about the same level, and so you have a lot of free Lilium Orb points to set them up, but we have now reached a point where the vast majority of Lilium Orb is going to be auto, because it takes way too long to select everything manually and would only give you a marginal benefit. We do select some particularly useful nodes manually a bit later on in the run. And you can also automatically select your skills, as he has just done. There are 3 presets, attack, defense, and balanced. Oddly enough, the one that ends up being the closest to what we want most of the time is actually the defense one, despite this being a speedrun. So you just select a defense preset and then you change a couple of things to ones that you need more.
Yeah, so basically, in this game, when party members are out of your party, they gain whatever experience the party members that were in your party gained. Only the main experience, though. They don't get the bonus experience, which is something that all Tales games have. Basically, depending on how well you performed in a fight, you get a little extra experience.
The spirit climb and the
Really doesn't make much of a difference, but sometimes if you don't get a lot of bonus experience, it could leave you slightly underleveled for certain menus, and thus you have to do things a little bit differently because you don't get as many skills. That has happened to me.
Yeah. There are a few prominent examples of that in the Mila run. I'm not sure of where it pops up in the Jude run, but I'm sure it still does.
It could have happened right there. There's a chance that Rowen and Elise are slightly underleveled, and I have to do their skills differently, and Elise doesn't have Chicken Run until later. Sometimes Rowen can be a little bit underleveled for another menu later and doesn't have as much intelligence. Now you're about to, for this next boss, you're about to see what we're going to do for the majority of the game.
Yeah, it was hinted at
See a sunset
back
like
when
this.
you had everyone
I
except
can't
for
help
Leia
but think
back
of
in
home.
Chapter 1, but now the strap can really take shape.
You have got to be kidding me. I'm really pissed off.
This boss does have a tendency to move around. Sometimes he can actually go underground and pop up under you. Sometimes he just escapes your spells with Iron Stance. Sometimes with Rowan you have to just move away a bit.
Yeah, so
So
you've got
some
Rowan, who has the most DPS by far. Leia and Elise, Elise and Mila are actually used for their spells which have the most amount of hits done, being Splash for Mila and the negative gate for Elise. And Leia, oddly enough, the best thing you can do with your last party slot is just continuously buff people over and over, even though they can only have one buff at a time. It is actually the most extra damage you can get out of your fourth slot.
I turned off. I didn't turn auto items back on.
Yeah. We'll do it.
That's something you got to be careful of, because the thing about this game is that with auto items, if you try to use an item yourself, sometimes you won't even get the chance because the AI party members will just use one, and obviously you'll have to wait for it to the item time to expire.
We finally stopped it.
That was too close.
Lead to like an infinite loop. So the only way you can stop it to be able to use your own items to turn them off. But then you have to remember to turn them on. And apparently I turned it off during the Hammerzam fight and never turned it back on. So that's why you saw Leia, Mila, and Elise just doing absolutely nothing for like 10 seconds.
Are we really gonna ride a wyvern?
I had completely
They
forgotten.
sound really scary.
Now we've beaten the boss and we're heading into Jiandu, which is, I guess, a city kind of based on Japanese culture. But basically, this is where the game's Coliseum is located. The game has a Coliseum, except maybe the early ones. Coliseum's actually not that great in this game. In other games, as part of the story, we need to be able to cross Fezzible Marsh to get to Fenmont to save Mila's 4 great spirits. But because the spirit climbs have shifted, the only thing that can get us there as a wyvern, and in order to get the wyverns, we have to compete in a tournament.
Also, this starts the subtle, and puts subtle in very heavy air quotes. Subtle showing that Alvin's been portraying this all along.
And it's hinted at a little bit, like in Chapter 1.
And yeah,
Like,
and
Alvin,
then,
like, snitches you out to the governor of Sherrilton, and then he tries to defend himself, saying, oh, we need to give information to get information back. And
yeah,
then
now it's just they just outright show him betraying the group actively, and you're just gonna sit there and it's like, how is the party this like stupid that they can't see this?
also, something I found recently is that if you're linked with Elise going into this fight, Tipo will always stay on, but if you're not linked, for some reason it comes off, which affects how much damage and how big her negative gate spell is. Made sure to link with Elise at the end of the last boss.
All in a day's work.
I just got what's probably the most common link fanfare cutscene with Rowen and Elise. And ideally, I would like to get that a lot more, because once you've seen a victory cutscene, you can actually, if you see it again, you can actually skip through it. Saves considerable time over the run.
All these statues seem to be of great warriors from eras
Yeah, in
past.
some earlier
I get
Tales
super
games, you
strong.
can
You think
skip
they'll make a
victory
statue of me
cutscenes
too?
by turning the voices off completely, but they wisened up to that pretty quickly, and in this game, it doesn't make a difference whether you have voices on or off. in
Like, you
terms of
can
how long
lower
you
the
would have
voices
to
to
wait.
nothing, and the game just still, like, registers it as being voice acted. On and off switch.
So that means you do get to listen to the voices, which, well, for better or worse. The voices are fine, and sometimes you can get some extra cues from listening to when voice clips happen, but
Don't you love mud and fresh mud and mommy, mommy, mommy?
the Mudden, very strong meme when the game came out and continued into the sequel as well.
So, in these next few battles, you're going to actually see the only other art besides Fireball that I'm going to use with Rowen, and that is Lance, which can be enhanced as a massive AoE attack.
Yeah. For every unique enemy your first Wind Lance hits, you can send out an equivalent number of that many extra Wind Lances, and they all pierce and hit AoE. So Wind Lance is generally a lot weaker than Fireball, but if you can hit, I think it's at least 2 enemies, and get at least 2 extra Wind Lances and have those Wind Lances also hit at least 2 enemies, then you can outdamage Fireball.
So,
It takes that much just to outdamage Fireball, which is pretty crazy, but just speaks volumes on how OP Fireball is.
Sorry, Railcoon, what is that you were saying about the input sensitivity?
Oh, if you get a moment in your settings, I think the reason why the TV comes through sometimes is you have automatic gain control on, which means when you're not talking, it like turns up the volume of your microphone. So like if there's a long loading screen and you go into settings and turn it off, it might fix the TV
How do I
issue.
do that?
Here,
Voice settings.
yeah, it's in voice settings at the bottom. You have to scroll.
Okay, automatic gain control.
Yeah,
So I turn that off.
yeah, go for it.
A fantastic victory.
Just keeps.
Do you still have a chance?
Doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, it's not too big of a deal. I was just offering that as a suggestion for like between shows. So you can always turn it back on if you need to. Or it could be the same issue we ran into before where Trance's Discord broke briefly, I'm not sure.
He might just have to reset his mic, just go into the voice options and reselect whatever mic it needs to be going through, and sometimes that fixes it for me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, is it good now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we hear you now.
I did that. I'm so sorry.
No problem.
It's Discord being finicky.
Hopefully that fixes all the mic problems for the rest of the run.
Oh, there wasn't too much missed there, just a bunch of easy Coliseum fights.
Yeah. The nice thing to point out about this area is it's actually connected to a swamp you can take a boat over to. In the early game, it's a decently high level area, so if you're playing casually, you can actually go over there and farm a few levels if you really wanted to. I think it also has a chest that has like a decent food item that if you don't have the food shop upgrade for at the time, that would help you out.
So this game kind of tells you when you've run out of food effects with those comments from the party members.
Yeah, they do not shut up very
Like,
much.
You might see Alvin complaining about not being used in battle a lot because we're him. Although we are going to use him for one more boss.
Yeah, they will remind you the whole game when you transition screens, and it's not fun.
And now we got a fairly annoying fight coming up. It can either go really well or really poorly. And part of the reason is because you have to fight with Jude, who just cannot stay alive.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing about Xillia is that once you get like actually good at the game, a lot of the boss battles come down to RNG of various aspects. It is like you're not going to be able to get a world record time by just getting lucky, unless you're already really good. But once you do get really good, a lot of the boss fights you have to hope that you get good enemy patterns and that other RNG factors that we'll encounter later on the run don't happen or do happen. So this is
one of the reasons
example
why
of that.
I equipped Jude spellcasting for this. It's because there are times when I'm just going to have to stop casting Fireball to move Rowen out of position. Spellcasting, if he canceled it during a casting animation, he'll be able to resume from where he left off and instantly cast the fireballs. That was a pretty good fight.
Yeah.
You didn't get experience, but
These
you
enemies
really
heal themselves a bit. They do heal themselves a bit, but as with most JRPG enemy items, they are less powerful than your items in terms of like percentage healed and whatnot. They don't do absolutely nothing, but they do very little.
Speaking of healing, you'll notice that I'm not really using any ins unless the story forces you to. The reason is because this game has a nice skill called Level Restore, which fully heals a party member whenever they level up. We're pretty much leveling up on every boss fight. We're going to get a free heal after just about every boss.
Yeah, and thankfully you get that skill relatively early. Later on you're going to get another busted pair of skills called HP Surge and TV Surge, which do a similar thing, except they are whenever you get revived from being dead, like no matter how good the item is, you will get back to full HP and TP, and those skills are so busted that they got nerfed in the sequel to only be available on certain characters. Kind of like how food got nerfed as well.
The royal
Like,
hunting grounds.
they actually did
An
pay
ominous
attention to what
neighbor.
was busted in
Let
this
us
game
take
and got
care
rid of
to
it
be
in
the
Xillia 2.
hunters and
Although
not the
Xillia
prey.
2 has its
Sounds good
own
to me.
truckload of busted stuff.
Ow!
But
The only,
that's-
the only downside about that game, speedrun, is that you have to play poker.
Yeah. And you have to do a really obnoxious grind fight. But in any case, none of that applies here. This game has its own issues as a speedrun, as most JRPGs do, but it's something you can get relatively good at and execute relatively consistent. So in that aspect, it is pretty decent run. Oh yeah, so what happened at the end of the Coliseum is that Elise got kidnapped, and so we have to go and rescue her. From this mine up, which he's going to enter after one more screen of the Royal Hunting Grounds.
Picking up a few chests with materials because I am going to do another food shop upgrade in the next town. That's going to get me the most broken food item in this game, the spicy chicken roll, which effectively doubles the amount of experience you get from every boss that you have it on for. I'm just going to restock on orange gels there.
Yeah, having the spicy
Yeah,
chicken
yeah,
roll is pretty much the
yeah,
sole
chocolate.
reason we end up not underleveled by mid-game. I mean, you could say we're pretty much in mid-game now, but like by the end of mid-game, we end up not underleveled at all.
And for Jude's story, you actually are even more overleveled by the end game than you are in Mila because you have to fight extra bosses. Which is very nice because I mentioned earlier how with
Hostiles.
when your party members leave, they come back with OP equipment, and since most of your party members don't leave in Chapter 4 on Jude's story, they don't get that equipment. Well, you get some extra levels that kind of helps counter the fact that you don't have the stronger equipment. So from what it's about the same in terms of you don't get the stronger weapons, but you have stronger stats.
Yeah, that's roughly accurate from what I can tell as well. Like, the extra HP is safety, obviously, and then the stats do kind of compensate for the weapon.
This is that other area where if I was playing Mila's side, I would use a holy bottle because it's very linear, and you're a high enough level that it would work. We're still underleveled from not getting that experience in Port Gandala, so it's not even worth using. But I am going to be using some holy bottles later in the run.
Is this a good time for me to cut in?
Yeah, nothing's going on.
Right, just want to remind people that October is Disability Awareness Month. We're featuring speedruns with disabled runners throughout the entire month. If you'd like to participate, you can type !disability month in chat, and there is a form there. And of course, we're helping to spread awareness for able gamers. They're a wonderful foundation that helps people who need assistive technology to play games have access to it. So you can do !able gamers in chat if you'd like to learn more about that. And of course, Hotfix is funded in part thanks to your subscriptions and bits. Thank you everybody who's tuned in, and we would very much appreciate it if you consider subscribing to support future broadcasts.
So since nothing's really going on right now, I'd just like to give a shout out. If any of you are fans of RPGs like this, right now on the RPG Valkyries channel, there is a marathon going on called Speedrun
Be
Ragnarok,
careful.
which
This
is
place is crumbling down all around us.
It's
or
as
the
if
charity
no human
Take
has
This,
set
which
foot
I
in here for
believe
years.
helps mental. So if you like RPGs, be sure to check out that marathon this week. Also, in about a month, there is going to be an all RPG marathon Limit Break channel called Questing for Glory. I believe a member of our community, The End, is going to be running Tales of Berseria in that marathon. Sure to check
Yeah,
out
that's
both
correct.
Speedrun Ragnarok and Questing for Glory.
Yes, we should mention briefly that the End has a very high tendency of getting new records in his marathon runs, so it should
I would
be an
say
entertaining
let's
sight
not.
regardless.
I would say let's not jinx it, but we actively kept saying that during the last marathon he was in, and he still world record. So
Yes, it seems to be jinx-proof, although it's not going to happen every time, obviously, but
I think the more jinx is he can't PB outside of a marathon now, and it drives him insane.
Right, so now we've been told, even though we effectively won the tournament, now we need the king's permission to get the wyverns. So we're heading into the cold mountains because what would a JRPG be without and a snow town? So we're heading to Candelar to meet King Gaius.
yeah, I'm not sure how much we really touched on it before, but at this point in the Xillia storyline, there's two different countries which are not actively warring yet, but very hostile towards each other, one of which is the one led by King Noctigal, which is where Jude is from and Leia is from, and we spent a significant portion of the game there in the first chapter, and this other one that we're in for most of the second chapter where the ruler is King Gaius, arguably a much better king.
A dead
Yeah,
end?
Noctigal is the one that
I'm so
paralyzed
sure it would lead to
Mila.
some awesome secret
The
place.
one that basically is responsible for all those experiments that happened in Fenmont. We mentioned, you may have wondered why we stopped talking about that Professor House. Well, he died. He was absorbed into the Lance of Kresnik along with the four great spirits, which Noctigal is trying to.
He's trying to make a weapon that can blast, destroy the other country.
Though he is actually being by his assistant, who you'll meet later. And his assistant is manipulating the King Noctigal to power up the Lance of Kresnik for another purpose. In the next town, I'm gonna visit the food shop and donate all my materials to the food vendor to get these spicy chicken rolls, which we're gonna be buying multiple times throughout the game because since they're so OP, they only let you twice per item. Two consecutive battles, rather. Definitely,
So-
most of the time we're going to be fighting back-to-back bosses, but there are a few times where we'll have a boss right before a worthless encounter, and there's nothing we can do, so we'll have to buy extras. About food items is that you can only hold one in your inventory at a time. However, if you have one used and in effect, you can still have another of the same food item in your inventory.
We should also mention that the food come in different sizes, but each size has the same effect for a different amount of battles. However, right now we only have enough materials to be able to afford the smallest size of the OP spicy chicken rolls, so we can only buy spicy chicken rolls small, which, as we said, only works for 2 battles. And in the sequel, they actually, not only did they heavily restrict access to food, they also made it so that spicy chicken roll only lasts for 1 battle, so they really compounded the nerfs on that.
Yeah, it's like as if they watched us when we learned all this. It was like, let's not do that and not do that.
Yeah, this game was pretty much, not by the Western community, because this game actually took like 2 years to come out, in the West compared to its Japanese release, but this game got speedrun pretty much immediately by the Japanese community after it came out. So it is possible that they saw the speedruns and how busted food was even back then. I mean, it was used by a lot of casual players, so we can't say for sure that the speedruns had anything to do with it, but if they did watch those Japanese speedruns back in the day, in 2011 when this game came out in Japan, they would have seen a very obvious example of food being absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, this game came out in the West in 2013, I think, and then the first real speedruns by Western runners who weren't like submitting to the Japanese leaderboards was back in 2014, I want to say. Then there was the whole RPG limit break run in 2015. Made the game take off as far as Western runners go. And to this day, Tales of Xillia is probably the, if not the most popular Tales speedrun, then definitely the second. Like, it's basically between it and Symphonia for being the most popular.
Yeah, like it's... I think you're right, about right. It's roughly even the amount of people we get joining on the server for either Symphonia or Xillia. Which, speaking of which, this is a good segue into this. So if you're ever interested in speedrunning any Tales of games ever, you can find plenty of information on pretty much any of the runs through the speedrun.com Tales of series. And as well in all of the speedrun leaderboards for every game, we have a link to our Discord, which you can join in pretty much in the introductory chat. Just let us know what you're interested in. We'll add you up as a member, and you have access to all of us who run the games for the knowledge base. And it's pretty easy to get into most of these runs. We actually have a lot of documentation for everything, especially Symphonia. There's a lot of documentation for Symphonia. Our man Jay, who ran it last year at RPG Limit Break, has done a amazing job in making sure that that game can be picked up by anyone.
We did have a few unfortunate souls this year trying to learn Vesperia with its remake coming out, and that is maybe not the hardest Tales of run, but very much up there as one of the hardest Tales of runs. But people who try to learn Symphonia or Xillia have generally had a better time with things. So if you do want to get started with Tales of speedruns or even JRPG speedruns in general, then this game is probably a better starting point.
I highly recommend that. Somebody that's at least done enough to touch most of the Tales of games. Xillia, Symphonia, and Berseria are probably the three easiest to get into.
I mean, this area you have to understand the game really well to.
Now we have
like,
Wingle
on a casual level.
It's the first boss fight where you're fighting two bosses that can link with each other. And well, any two bosses that can link with each other can use link darts, just like your party.
This is also one of the first boss fights that super armor becomes a thing. So super armor, as you can see there with Wingle right now, can absorb a certain number of hits in this game, and so it usually refreshes, I believe in this game, after every action they do. It can be somewhat detrimental at some points.
So you may have just noticed that Wingle tried casting a wind spell on Rowen, but Rowen actually absorbed it because of his armor. And that's going to come into effect in the next boss fight as well.
This is the first fight where you really want dual burn, as in you want them to link together, because it actually makes their AI more cooperative in general, and then you want to burn one of them so they both get burned. And that can basically make the fight take half the time.
Fastest boss in this game. I think Ivor is the fastest.
Yeah, I don't think they just linked up. I stand corrected.
But he's very fast, and he can just move right out of the way, even after you've like targeted him with a fireball. But you just got him down.
So as we've mentioned earlier with burn, which just triggered now, is we want to get, if we got burned really early on this fight, it takes what made this fight a lot easier to manage as well as go a lot faster. But
Because they
you just got there at the
each
end.
other, and if one of them gets burned when they're linked, the other will get burned as well.
This is also an interesting fight in some way because of how their stats work out. Presser, who is the water element from the opposing, or from Gaius' kingdom, like the water element user, she has really high magic defense, but she is weak to fire. But because her magic defense is so high, she takes less damage from Fireball than Wingle does, even though Wingle is not weak to fire. So stats really can make a difference sometimes. And in general, those two have really, really high stats, and they actually take a lot of wearing down.
Yeah, that is casually actually a really difficult fight for a lot of first-time players.
This is actually one of the few instances where I'm going to manually activate a few nodes because I want to boost Rowan's intelligence, which not only increases the damage he does with Fireball, but increases the likelihood of me getting burns.
Yeah, in Mila's story, you go as far as wanting to activate a whole entire skill doing this. I don't think you quite get the levels to do it in Jude's story, though I might be wrong.
So you guys were mentioning Pressa and Wingle. There are 4 members of the Chimeriad, and each member has like their own element. Pressa is water, Wingle is wind, Jiao, who you saw me fight earlier, is earth, and Agria, who you saw at the very beginning, is fire. You all have like this rivalry with one of your party members. Like Jiao has, like, I don't even know if I would call it a rivalry with Elise, because he actually
He's a protectorate. Yeah, he's a protectorate of Elise. Is I guess the best way of putting it.
Lisa is the ex-girlfriend of Alvin, so she has issues with him. Wingle with Rowen is, maybe he looked up to him, but he has a rivalry with Rowen. And then Agria just gets into a rivalry with Leia for no reason at all.
For plot.
Yeah, basically, Agria gets really annoyed at how self-righteous Leia comes off as, and that's what starts their rivalry.
This is one of the easiest boss fights in the game. In fact, I've beaten this boss fight blindfolded.
Yes, it does help when you can only take damage from one of its moves.
Oh yeah, and Alvin has a gun. We don't really get to see him often, but yeah, he has a gun because he actually can't use magic for some reason.
For story.
For story purposes.
I think is from Tales of Vesperia? Anyways, that attack that he's doing does no damage to Rowen because of his armor. The only attack that he can do to, like, damage Rowen is the attack that where he charges. The attack right there.
If you do let him out of hit stun, he can do the fireball, yeah. That does the most damage. But it's nothing. Another thing, okay, so we've already mentioned that quite a few things got nerfed in Xillia 2. There's yet another one which got nerfed that I forgot to mention up until now, and that is you get elemental resistances from certain skills. But in this game, in Xillia 1, the elemental resistance skills, every character gets every elemental resistance skill, and when you're linked with someone, you get the full benefit of their skill as well, even if it's exactly the same skill. So basically by linking with any character in like mid to late game, you can resist every element by 60%, which is a crazy amount. Then you really only have to equip like 1 or 2 pieces of gear that also resist that element to be able to start absorbing it, or at least take no damage from it. And as you might imagine in Xillia 2, they much more heavily restricted access to the elemental resistance skills to counter that. This game has a lot of busted things that got nerfed in Xillia 2. Though, yeah, like we said, Xillia 2 has its own share of busted things that they added to that game to make up for it.
just to say on the topic of Xillia 2, I still can't believe somebody okayed the chromatis.
No, it's not busted at all. What are you talking?
Yeah, not at all. But anyways, so as it seems to always be when we get to this town, we're just gonna run around and talk to a lot of people for a bit before we finally end up hanging out again. At least the music's really good. Also, another cutscene about Alvin definitely not betraying us at all.
He made us
Right.
run all the way to the shopping center to talk to him. Everyone else stayed at the manor. Could have saved like 30 seconds if he just stayed at the manor, right?
Yeah, the game also has a tendency to lock your quick jump whenever you're in the middle of these kind of talk for every character plot dumps, so unfortunately we can't just jump around to the closest entrance of the town to where each party member is, otherwise you would probably use that at least a little bit.
There are times when the map is just unaccessible because of plot triggers. Because the game expects you to come out of a certain cutscene. Now after finally getting the Wyverns, we're finally heading to Fenmont to fight. Has been the primary antagonist, King Noctigal. Just noticed earlier, when I was in Cambalar, I actually took a slight detour to the Xillian Woods Temple. Although that actually doesn't come into play until later, but the reason I did that is basically for what I'm going to be doing momentarily when I get to the next screen. I mentioned earlier that as long as you've been to a certain screen, it will register on your map. And so look, I just skipped an entire screen.
Yeah, the game doesn't let you quick jump directly to Fenmont until you've been in there, but because you have been on that first screen of Fenmont before, it will let you jump to the exit of the screen that you were just on, which connects to that screen of Fenmont for whatever reason, and you can just save like 10 to 20 seconds of walking. Pretty neat.
Do it there as well. Although that barely saves any time. Because the lab entrance door is like right in front of you. It's like maybe 1 second. If you do it quickly enough.
There's also a small amount of like influence of what kind of setup you have for your PS3, whether you're playing disc or digital, and whether you have an SSD in your PS3. It's not that important for this game in particular compared to some other Tales of games, but in general, like these quick jump strategies are going to be, well, maybe not that one because it's the same amount of loads, but some strategies might be determined based on whether you've got an SSD.
Also, it hasn't. I don't know if it's been tested whether or not having an SSD in your console drastically affects the run.
Yeah, it does affect this run like marginally, but what we don't know is exactly how much time it saves to have one.
Yeah, so far we haven't had two or three sets of runners that use it or don't, so we can actually verify. They're also near the same skill level. The speculation is it would be similar to Grace's and save. So Grace's saves around what I think it's 5 minutes for the full run. So this one would probably be around 2 to 3.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite 5, but I have to say there's probably at least a couple. In any case, yeah, the problem is that
it was a lot, but you're probably right.
once this game I mean, once this game had that initial rush of activity in 2014, 2015 with the whole RPG limit break thing, once it died off after that, there hasn't really been like two good people or two people who know to run well running it at once.
Also, I've heard that some people say that the Japanese version runs faster, like at a higher frame rate or something.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that. That would be a Jep question.
Yeah, it was something more like it has less lag when you enter menus, but then Jep, who is an extremely skilled runner of this game and other Tales games from France, who has like basically the best times for, or very close to the best times for a few games out of the Western community, he said that actually the Japanese version isn't faster, so now we don't really know what to believe anymore.
Yeah, there's still a lot of testing that needs to happen with a lot of the PlayStation 3 games in general for Tales of.
Alright, back to the boss battle. You're fighting Agria. Unfortunately, Agria resists fire, but of course, like we're saying, you're fighting a boss, a single target boss for the most part. She does have minions, but they die very quickly, so even though she resists fire, Fireball is still the best spell on her by far.
Agria is also the first boss in this game that can overlimit and use a Mystic Art. Sometimes bosses, if they want to be really trolly, they can just overlimit at the very beginning.
Yeah, the overlimit triggers in this game are only very slightly consistent.
Spell, they are not going to be able to avoid his attack.
I'm still not convinced that there actually isn't just conditions for overlimit. They can just kind of do it.
I think it's a bit of both. Like, some conditions, there might be some that are condition-based, but a lot of it is just RNG.
Yeah,
It has to be RNG if they overlimit at the start of the fight.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I think, I don't remember if Burns another runner in the Tales of community, but he did a playthrough of Xillia on the hardest difficulty and got to use that boss fight on Mila's side, which is the hardest boss fight in this game, period.
What's wrong?
And it felt like after every combo or two, Musette would go into overlimit. It was silly. I think he has the VOD up somewhere.
Could be difficulty based. This run is done on normal difficulty, by the way. I guess they just decided that easy was just...
It's just a standard in our community to stay on normal as the basic route over easy.
The earlier
it's just kind of
didn't even have an easy difficulty. I know Symphonia doesn't.
Yeah, it's a point. It's always a point of talking. Mostly, we don't really add leaderboards until it actually becomes a thing that's needed.
Yeah, if people cared to optimize anything easy, then there would definitely be a leaderboard for it, but like easy in this game, we didn't really talk about how the difficulty influence it, but for this game, it only impacts their HP and stats, and easy just makes every enemy just hit slightly less hard and takes slightly less damage to kill, and it's not really anything engaging. The boss fights still play out the exact same way. You can't really cut any corners, you still need to set up things the way you would during this ongoing run.
Yeah, but like
at the end of that first fight, I was able to skip the victory cutscene because I had already seen it before.
Yeah,
but we have to fight 4 battles as we go through Order Palace to find Noctigal. They're pretty easy, but the 3rd and 4th fights can get a bit trollish. This next fight that I'm about to engage in, even though it's not a boss fight, the enemies can actually Iron Stance out of your spells for some odd reason. Party members down. And the one after, they can use like this really bad darkness attack. Luckily that last fight actually always drops treats and specifics, which... and MP, or TP, which I'll use just before the boss. There's an Iron Stance, right there. Nice.
Thankfully that third fight does have a counter for the Dark Spell, which we'll talk about when we get there.
I was doing my strategy menus earlier. I said all my party members to protect yourself. It means that if you don't give them any macro commands, they're just gonna not do anything except avoid attacks and guard.
Let's move onward.
Which is what we want, because we're basically macroing them almost the entire run. So ideally, we want them to avoid guard. However, if they're in the middle of a spell, they're not going to do it. Also, if you continuously queue macro spells, they cannot use auto items.
This isn't visiting.
Basically, with the exception of when they run out of TP and cannot use those spells anymore, actually have to stop casting a spell with one of your party members if a character dies, so that you can get them revived. It's choice, since she's just buffing characters and not keeping the enemies in hit stun.
Alright, so those butterflies, they can cast Negative Gate like Elise, and it's a really annoying spell if you get hit by it. But thankfully, what happens is that if you have Elise herself cast Negative Gate, for some reason the butterflies cannot cast it. So you just abuse that fact to avoid them doing it, and then you can just control them using your own Negative Gate plus Wind Lance, since it's 3 enemies grouped up in an area that makes Wind Lance actually worth using.
I think it's something based off their coding. They only allow one animation of a certain spell going off at a time for the bigger ones.
Yeah,
Because it's a similar thing. It's been a similar thing since, I think, Abyss. Because of the 3D effects.
In that menu right there, I equipped stat boosting skills, which are pretty broken in this game. Basically, by a certain percentage. And if they are linkable skills, so if you are linked with, if you and your link partner both have a stat boosting skill, the effects of your stat boosting skill, but also your link partners.
We should also probably mention that Nutshgirl got Lovenant immediately there.
Yeah. Also, if you watch Nautigal's moves quite closely, if you played Tales of Grace's F, he might remind you of a certain boss from that game. That some of his moves are pretty much carbon copies.
Like a character from Tales of Hearts.
I haven't played enough of Hearts, so I cannot say anything. But he has a few of his moves are very similar to the King from Grace's F.
Yeah, one thing, so Nightgirl did overload at the very start there, and he didn't do too much, but I'm not sure if we'll get to see it in this fight, but one thing Nightgirl can do is enter overlimit and then begin casting a spell, and some real weird stuff happens. Okay, looks like it might be happening now. No, he's just vampire sphere. No, there we go, okay, so he's casting a spell, and whenever your attacks and spells hit him, it just delays his spell very slightly, and with enough build-up from that, you can stop him casting his spell all the way until he runs out of overlimit, at which point he'll flinch out of it, so he basically wasted his entire overlimit casting a spell that never actually got cast. Which is one good thing about Noctgal in particular. It's quite a lot of the time his overlimits will just cause absolutely no harm to you.
That was a clean boss fight.
Yeah, 2 overlimits, but it went reasonably well despite all of that.
You have lost. I request that you stand down.
So, I'm about to get one of the most OP skills in this game, Impregnable Guard. Basically, Impregnable Guard equipped, it means their guard cannot be broken, even if they're attacked from the rear.
Yeah, this one is another discovery by Jepsan.
Apparently, if you fully guard a boss's arcane art, they cannot get the Mystic Guard off. But it's only possible if Impregnable Guard is equipped. You'll always have the opportunity to do it with your controlled character. Or, whether or not your AI characters will guard a Mystic Art is kind of random.
Yeah, like, they have to guard every single hit, and if you don't have Impregnable Guard, then usually you'll get flinched by the Arcane Art before it's over, and so then it doesn't count as you guarding it anymore.
And they'll only
But
do it
obviously-
if they're not already like in the middle of a spell. Actually, I think if they're in the middle of a spell casting animation, they might cancel it and avoid the enemy. However, if they're actually casting it, they can't actually cancel it. The only character that can actually cancel a spell that's been initiated is Rowen, which is something I haven't talked about, but doing fireball spamming, I've been guard canceling after the 4th fireball to instantly be able to start casting the next one.
Yeah, eventually, if you learn the game and you keep playing it, then eventually you end up learning the timing where you cancel like halfway between the 3rd and 4th fireballs, and if you press the button just right, then you can guard cancel and the 4th fireball will still come out and you start casting the next one a little quicker. But if you do it too early, then you'll only get 3, which is obviously worse than just waiting for the 4th. So it's a bit of a precise art, but it can save a marginal amount of time. It's very hard to tell like how much time doing one thing better actually saves in this kind of speedrun, of course, because it's not just your own actions that decide how long the fight goes, it's all your AI teammates and the random behavior of the enemy as well. So you can't just say that doing fireball guard cancelling a tiny bit better will save 5 seconds. It just doesn't go like that. You might lose 10 seconds on a fight because the pattern happened, then you might gain 20 on it. Makes it annoying to actually test strats, but you just have to kind of play off averages, I suppose.
And also, on my way to Feasible Marsh, I'm picking up materials again because I am going to be doing another weapon shop expansion pretty soon.
Chico's swelling from all the moisture. And just like that, we're at war?
Yes. And with tens of thousands of soldiers on either side, it looks to be a massive one.
So you picked up the holy bottles, which will be used in a few mid to late game dungeons. We're basically now at the end of mid game, heading towards late game by this point. You can see that there's 2 hours on the timer.
So what's
Past
about to
halfway
happen
mark,
is
they're on.
I'm going to engage in 10 consecutive fights. However, the game considers all 10 fights to be basically the same fight. So basically, all the experience that you get from all of these fights I'm about to do gets added up and rewarded to you at the end. And if you have a food item in effect, the multiplier applies to all of that experience. I think a bit of randomness as to how much enemies appear in these fights. Because what happens is a certain amount of enemies will be available to kill at the start, and then more enemies are going to spawn.
Yeah, the enemies will spawn randomly, but they will always stop spawning whenever the voice lines, like there are scripted voice lines in every phase of the fight. Whenever the voice lines are over, the enemies will stop spawning, and once you kill all the enemies on screen, it'll move to the next phase. So if you kill enemies really fast, you can farm more experience, but you generally can't really make this fight any faster. It's just always going to take about 3 minutes total.
Oh, one thing you can do is keep an eye on the enemies when Rowen is casting Fireball and see if they get killed. That way you can change the direction that Rowen is facing to make sure that he's not wasting fireballs.
Yeah, this does demand a lot of situational awareness from you, so like, just because you can't speed it up that much doesn't mean that you can be completely lazy about it.
At the end, all the experience is rewarded, and since I have a spicy chicken Rowen effect, all that experience gets multiplied by 2. So we become very over-leveled after these fights.
Yeah, I'd say that this fight gives you about the same as either a boss or even close to 2 bosses worth, just because you kill so many enemies during all those wastelands. And they generally die in 1 or 2 fireballs, or maybe it really depends on the enemy itself and whether you get your criticals. So we didn't mention at the time, but he equipped an item called the Knight's Crest, which boosts Rowan's crit rate, and crits do like something like 2.5 times the usual damage. So you really need your crits to happen to speed up fights.
You may have noticed I waited
doesn't
until
exist.
Rowen was finished casting before guard canceling. And also I waited until the enemy he was targeting was defeated so that he would automatically redirect the finished fireball cast at the next enemy. This is probably the biggest use of Wind Lance, by the way. At the beginning of every fight I use it to target like all the enemies that are currently on screen. After that, it's not really worth it because then the enemies are just too spread out.
Is there a break point where if you kill enough enemies, you gain enough extra experience to like save time, or is it just go for as many as you can just because?
It's really just as many just because I think like you will gain an extra level if you get like say 3,000, 4,000 extra experience, but each enemy will only give a couple of hundreds. Kill a lot of extra enemies to make any appreciable difference.
Of course, there's bonus EXP.
Which bonus EXP is a reward depending on your combo, based off the highest what you get during the fight. Which this one being as long as it is, depending on how the magic moves all hit out, you can get a decently high one.
Combo experience is something that's a lot more prominent in other Tales of games, particularly Tales of Xillia 2, but it does have its uses in this game. More in the melee side of things, where you need to get a big combo on those Fort Gandala fights that we were talking about as giving way more experience than the ones in Jude. You also need to get a big combo on those.
Yeah, the biggest showing of what bonus experience can do for comboing is in Vesperia. It's even used in the route itself. So depending on how long your combo is, it's actually a multiplier based off of, I believe, a % of the HP drops from the boss. And you can get it up to crazy amounts to the point that there's, for the Medusa Butterfly in Vesperia, there's 2 strats. And the difference between the 2 strats is, I believe, Jep said 5 to 6 levels, depending on how fast your inputs are. And that's a lot in Vesperia.
Yeah, that's basically the same as what happens in Xillia 2. You grind a single super powerful boss mob and you get an absolutely ginormous combo on them, and then you are at least sort of over leveled for the rest of the game, or at least until Endgame. And that's basically the same for both games. Although I think it happens earlier in Xillia 2 than in Vesperia.
Yes, it happens decently early. Xillia, it's about, Vesperia, it's about halfway?
Yeah, Xillia 2 it's about an hour into a 3-hour arc, so a little early.
Yeah, I think Vesperia's is around 2 hours, 2.5 in the 5-hour run that it is.
So Symphonia, if you get good combos, you can get some good titles for them.
Yeah. And titles and Symphonia affect stats unlike the other games.
Okay, so yeah, you can see you got 14,000 experience from that fight, which is pretty much as a boss at this point in the game gives. If not even more. He's coming up on a Chimeriad boss fight where you actually fight 3 members of the Chimeriad, but it's easier than the one you did earlier where you only fought 2, so go figure.
Yeah, the compensate, they drop their stats and their HP.
Well, it's also because you're stupidly overleveled at this point, and you just got access to a single really busted skill. I'm not 100% sure if the Jude route has it for this fight, but Rowen has a skill called Overclocked. I think he actually did just activate it.
It's just enough for it after the Fezabel fights. It's actually possible to have it before the Fezabel fights, but you would have to manually do his orb, and so the amount of time it would take to manually do it basically counters whatever time you could save on those Fezabel fights with Overclocked. So convenient menu-wise to just do it after.
Yeah,
Same
overclocked
thing with the
vastly increases your damage, and in exchange for a big TP cost increase, but all the other skills he's been building up on Rowen throughout the game have basically made TP costs on Rowen not relevant, because you get TP cost reductions for casting the same spell over and over, which is exactly what we're doing. Not to mention Fireball is just not that expensive to begin with. So in this fight, you're just ridiculously overpowered compared to the first fight against the 2 members of the Chimeriad, and you can do basically 1,000
Jao
damage
will
per
not leave
fireball.
Rowen alone.
I was about to say this would be going better if Jal did not decide he's only going to target Rowen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Jal's the big worry as he is in
This is
his
not going
other
well.
fight.
Yeah, it's more like Wingle and Jal. They are all annoying. Like, Wingle and Jal both have their annoying points. Like, Wingle is really fast, runs up to you, does his stuff, flinches you a lot if you're not guarding. Jal still is really OP, still hits like an absolute truck with that ground
For
smashing
someone
move.
who's really big, he's very fast.
Yeah, not quite as fast as Wingle, but fast enough.
Is by far the least threatening.
Yeah. You can see that basically as soon as he got Wingle into a few fireballs, Wingle just vanished, and Zhao will do the same if Zhao can stop moving out of the fireballs.
Yeah,
That's
you
basically
can
1,000 damage per fireball.
you can watch the little marker above their head, which is also shows their HP actively tick down, unlike some of the other bosses.
And Presser is still taking basically the same damage from Zhao as from Fireball as Zhao, despite her fire weak. She's still got that OP magic stance compared to the others. But with a bit of sustained damage, these go down pretty quickly.
That was not a good fight.
It wasn't, but it was still not all that slow regardless.
It was really just nothing I could have done.
We'd still win.
And you can see that fight gave 18,000, whereas the wave fight gave 14,000, so roughly equivalent. Bosses do give way more XP than normal mobs in this game in general, so the fact that the fight with only mobs is normal mobs is even able to come close is quite something.
Well, now we're coming up on our showdown with Gaius, which you can win this fight, but you don't have to, and it's far faster to just lose.
And it's not an easy fight to win either.
This is basically comparable. It's not quite as hard as Kratos 1 in Tales of Symphonia, but it's basically comparable to like Kratos 2, and those are basically like super bosses in Symphonia where you're expected to lose but you can win.
In the name of the great
Went pretty well.
But yeah, also like all the Chimeriad that are based around the element, Gaius is actually based around light. Even though some of his moves look like fire, they're mostly ice-based light-based moves.
That's why I removed equipment from multiple party members, because they're leaving anyway. So they're going to come back with new equipment, so I want them in my inventory so I can sell them for money. And I swapped in Jude and Alvin because they haven't been developed. So they will die faster.
Yeah, you don't use the... I think you use the Xillia mob on Jude at the start of Chapter 2 and that's it, and you don't use it on Alvin ever since basically the Zhao fight. Which, as we mentioned right back at the start, if you don't level someone with the Xillia mob, they may as well just be level 1. Or whatever level they were when you stopped using the Xillia mob, so... It's basically like Alvin is still level 7, even if he shows as being level 40.
That's about
So here's the major like big plot twist for the game. It's so the evil chancellor revealed his true nature with the cannon and shot it and broke something called the schism, which is a divide that keeps this world separate from the outside world, because the outside world effectively has been draining so much mana it's been killed off. And Maxwell, even though Mila doesn't remember doing this, blocked off this part of the world from the rest of it to help maintain it. And now with the schism broken, the forces from that other
I'm so
side of the
cold,
world
I
are
can't
starting to
feel my
invade here.
fingers.
In humans,
This game has two worlds, Rize, Maxia, and Olympius.
But as a spirit
Gilland,
I'm
who was
fine.
masterminding Noctigal's plot with Lance Presnick, wants to basically bring the Olympian army and steal all of the spirits and mana lobe energy from Rize Maxia. Alvin
Also-
happens to be from Olympius and was conspiring with them, but got betrayed.
And it's also the reason why Alvin can't use magic, is because everybody over in Olympias cannot use magic anymore. Also, this is another one of the major branches between the Mila and Jude story. So after the events from the camp, when it explodes, it separates the whole party. And so Jude wakes up in this ice area with a new member of our party that's temporary, Musette. Mila wakes up on a different side that's actually an active volcano, and unfortunately, she gets Rowen. We don't have him, so we'll have to deal with that. Now, Musette's not in the party, of course, because we wouldn't want to have to set up another temporary member, but we would also, get a lot of free stuff. But we'll catch up to the other two party members that we'll be getting for the rest of this, which is Leia and
Alvin
Alvin.
and Elise.
Oh, and Elise. That's
Oh,
right.
I'm sorry,
Leia's
no.
the other.
Leia and Mila, Leia and Rowan are with Mila. Alvin and Elise are who you get with Jude.
Yeah, they made sure to give a healer in each group, as well as pretty much kind of whatever is missing from the other main characters. So Alvin being the heavy hitter and a little bit of a tank, if everybody was the same level put up, and Rowan to be a long range caster, which is kind of missing from the other group.
The problem is they gave both of the casters to Mila's story, and both of the melee fighters to Jude's.
Wait, I thought you said Elise is in Jude's group.
Yeah, I meant Rowan and Mila are casters.
Yeah. Well, yeah, pseudo caster for me a little bit, yeah. And in my opinion, because the diversion, this boss coming up is a little bit harder.
Basically,
it's not so much.
I'm sorry. This boss
you
fight
go, yeah.
coming up is one of the reasons why nobody ran Jude until this summer.
It's
Without
not so
knowing
much.
who wants to do a boss.
It's not so much that this boss ends up being ludicrously difficult, though, right?
The funny thing is, if you had Rowan, this boss would be insanely easy because these Aqua Dragons are weak to fire. Whereas the fight they gave you Rowan for, the boss is resistant to fire.
But ironically, you do so much damage with Fireball, you just proceed to not care.
But I've got a strategy that you're about to see, and it's one you might not have been expecting.
Yeah. I mean, Fire Teal in the Mila story, which is the boss you fight instead of this one coming up, is, I wouldn't say the easiest boss in the game, but one of the easiest bosses in the game. Just usually gets stomped ridiculously bad.
Fire Teagle's actually not that easy of a boss in the Mila speedrun. They can stop you really fast, and you don't have as much crisis control.
I mean, it is
Party.
not. Yeah, it can go wrong, but when it goes right, it goes really, really quickly. Like, if you burn the Fire Teagle, yes, burn the Fire Teagle, even though it's literally on fire. If you burn it, then it pretty much vanishes in like 30 seconds.
As you can
But
see
obviously
here,
it
I
can go
now
wrong.
have to wait forever to develop Alvin and Jude's Lilium Orbs. Because without these Lilium Orbs, I can't win the fight.
Mila's story, you just never develop Alvin after early game. Like, actually never. In Jude, you develop him at least here. I think the Japanese route actually keeps developing him after this and starts actually using him. But Trance is just going to be reverting back to the more standard party with with Mila, Leia, and not using Alvin any more than necessary. But yeah, you do eventually have to level up Jude even in Mila's story, but it does take a long time regardless. But I think like Japanese routes for Jude's story actually use Alvin more actively as well. Just still not until this point, but after this point they keep.
No, I know Japanese runners had done Jude runs, but they never saved any of their VODs, so I wasn't able to use them when routing. So I kind of just did.
Yeah, like we only have bits and pieces and scraps, and and it's not really enough to make your own route. So Chance has basically done all of it himself, and done a pretty good job, honestly.
So you can see there that Jude has a new ability called Musette, in which he actually summons Musette to come out and fight. It's very temporary ability, but it's actually very solid.
And you're controlling Elise, huh?
Alright, finally she was able to use that specific plus. I was talking about how AI characters can just constantly proc auto items when you don't want them to use it. The only way to be able to use an item yourself is to do it manually.
So why'd you pick to use Dreadwing over Negative Gate?
Wings is actually a pretty strong move. We literally just learned it in the last boss. After the last boss.
Yeah, negative gates damage is not the best. Dreadwings is better.
This is like not going too well, although I kind of messed up at the beginning. Like, I've gotten sub 1 minute with this. I posted a video of it in the Discord once. You guys can just kind of move out of the way.
As far as Mystic Arts go, like I think there is 1 or 2 intentional uses at the very end of the run, and then there is also the forced use during the final boss cutscene, so you really just have to wait until the very end.
I'm out of orange gels with the other characters.
Yeah, I mean you have 1 basically dead at this. Should be alright, but that is rough. Yes. No denying.
We won.
Oh, the other one was basically dead as well. That was a rough fight. It is like the king reason that. Well, I'd say the early game and this are the main reasons people don't like to run Jude. But it is something that you can probably get around with enough.
Thank you, Wandering Mind.
You've come up with a pretty good strat.
Maybe Mila might know.
Yeah. As far as the speedrun goes, Jude's story basically makes the bad parts of Mila's story even worse, apart from the obvious lack of the Muse 1v1 fight. And then there isn't really anything that's like any better in the Jude story, so that's another reason why it's much less run. It's not to say that it's a terrible run by any means. You can see that Chance going through it pretty fluidly, and it's not by any means not entertaining, but for the runner it is a rougher run.
Yeah, it's just a harder run. It doesn't make it any less entertaining or fun to play.
Also a lot more menuing.
You seem unwell. It's nothing.
Yeah, you need to do a bit more incremental control instead of just letting your menuing carry you for a bit.
Yeah, basically the idea for that fight was to cast Dreadwings with Elise and macro variable trigger, which is like a quick long range attack that Alvin has, and then macro Muse with Jude. But I forgot to turn the auto items back on, so that kind of put me in a a bad auto item loop. Control Elise in that fight is primarily just so I can manually control Elise's target and also move her out of the way. Dragon attacks because she is the main damage dealer with Dreadwings.
I'm quite impressed with these armaments.
I just don't have anything better. Actually possible to learn a linked art with Jude and Alvin called Inferno Dance that would be very effective on those bosses. However, you can't get it by manually doing Alvin's Lilium Orb. I'm sorry, you can't get it by orbing Alvin. You would have to manually do it. So I feel like the time that you could save doing that strat instead would be countered by the longer menu, not to mention that you can only do it when the link gauge has reached thresholds, so...
Yeah, I think if you wanted to like invest in something like that, you would probably also want to commit to using Alvin later as well. I mean, you can do it. It's not like he's a bad character if he's invested in. It's just he's not really any better or worse than anyone else. So, like, it's not in the middle story. It is nowhere near worth it to spend the time menuing to give him his Lilium stuff. And in a Jude run, it's still a questionable play.
I'm getting into.
So we're about to reach the make or break enemy on whether or not you can get a zero encounter run.
Look, everyone, look! Check out my awesome new duds!
Particularly for New Game Plus, where up till this point you could have just used holy bottles through the whole thing, and generally there isn't any huge reason why you should have taken an encounter in New Game Plus up to this point. In New Game there are a few places where you are quite likely to take one.
This enemy, if he wants to, he can just block your path like that. It's like 50-50 whether you can outmaneuver him. However, it's actually faster to just take the encounter than it is to wait for him to despawn. I forgot to do my menu.
Oh, we don't have Elise. Yeah, this is why you want to menu before you reach this point, so you can get Elise back in the party for the chicken run skill, because if you do the chicken run skill, then the escape bar fills up in like 1 second, and it becomes ridiculously fast.
I'm actually glad that I got that encounter, because that would have been pretty bad if I had remembered to do that before the next few fights.
Fair. Very fair.
I think that's the only menu I've forgotten so far. Technically, that menu could be skipped entirely if you just didn't swap in Jude and Alvin to the party. Well, actually, no. For some reason, I think they just throw Jude into your party when your party rejoins. I don't know why. I tested it. So no matter what, you have to swap them out.
That matches what I remember from Mila as well. They do weird stuff with the party around this point in the game.
Sometimes they just randomly put a party member in.
Well, of course, you're having to reconstruct your party. They're having to reconstruct the party after your groups join together, but they almost make it so that you just have what you had before you got split. But then for some reason, Jude is always in it as well. It's almost there, but not quite, and it just gets infuriating.
We've got some fairly fast fights here. And the next two, the boss music plays, but they're not really bosses. Especially the last fight. The same as the first two, but with an extra enemy.
Well, this jumping robots fight was before we learned Windland, and before people were actually good at the game, people actually had trouble on this fight because they would just keep jumping over your fireballs and they would eventually reach you, and by that point you are not in great shape. But if you use Wind Lance on it, or if you just don't mess it up, then it's not a notable fight at all. But once upon a time people had trouble with it.
Now we are actually siding with our former enemy Gaius to take on a common enemy, Gillen. So we're teaming up with him to board the ESS Zenithra, which is this giant boat. Years before the game began, existed in Olympias, but crashed through the schism and into Rize Maxia. including Alvin, as well as Jude's father, who is actually an Olympian. That in the main story, you have to do a side quest.
Yeah, though Jude does have mana, of course, because his mother was from Xillia.
In fact, the Alvin, Jude's father being an Olympian is the reason why he was able to make those devices that can restore a person's ability to walk. He used a Spyrix because of, I think, some accident that Leia had. Leia nearly became crippled. Why he refused to help when we needed to...
Yeah, because we learned this a little bit later on, but pretty much the main reason why the outside world's dying is because their heavy use of Spyrix drains mana quite heavily. So Jude's father didn't want to use it because he knew pretty much the chain of events that gets caused by the use of Spyrix.
Yeah, basically, like, the spirits are like what causes mana, and when Resurrections use mana, it only temporarily like drains spirits, but when Spyrixes use mana, it actually just flat out kills off spirits, and that's what makes them run out of mana and want to come to Resurrectia to harvest more. And then in Xillia 2, something, the major plot point is replacing Spyrix with something else that can still provide the same benefits, but has, like, does not actually kill spirits, and that's what half of the plot is a bit about in that game. The other half being the crazy OP-ness that is the Chromatus.
So yeah, now we're on the boat. It's a kind of somewhat lengthy dungeon, but not too hard to go through. And then a pretty challenging boss fight at the end, depending on how the AI wants to behave.
Yeah, this boat has a, like, rule, like, if you always turn the same direction after you come out of the room, you'll make it through the boat. I can't remember which direction it was. It was either left or right.
Pretty much left at all times.
Yeah, alright. Always turn left, that does sound familiar.
You can take those enemies out with a single wind lance. But yeah, this is probably Mila's story, the hardest dungeon to memorize when learning the run. Probably for Jude as well, except I mean, the only one I can think of that might be harder is the Temporal Crossroads in Chapter 4.
Temporal Crossroads is just a road, though. It does have that weird... Well, we'll get there eventually and we'll see what it's like, but it does just end up being a straight line.
This dungeon has this gimmick where after I pass through the screen, you're going to notice there's absolutely no enemies. So basically, as you're moving through this dungeon, there's an invisible timer that's going on, and I think it only goes... the timer is only going when you're in the inside of the boat. So like I went out of that, pick up that chest. I don't think it actually is going when I'm outside of the boat, and I think it resets each time you leave it, because I've done some testing and I've ended up getting the quote-unquote alert a little bit later.
There is definitely a random component to the alert.
There's a bit of RNG to it, but after a while, you'll hear them say something like, the enemy has infiltrated the port sector, and then once they say that, the next screen you enter, where enemies can... Well, the next screen you enter, although I don't think they can enter the teleporter rooms. Also, one thing you're going to notice is I'm going to be picking up a few chests that I wouldn't pick up if I was doing Mila's story. Because, as I mentioned earlier, on Jude's story, you don't get the OP equipment at the end that you would get on Mila's story, and Elise still has the same armor that she had when she rejoined us after the Hammerzam fight, so any equipment for Elise, she's going to go into the endgame with very weak equipment. Luckily, there are 2 pieces of equipment that I can pick up going into the endgame, one of which is on this ship. So I picked up a Sacred Helm, which Jude better head here, because Jude doesn't get any armor upgrades at all. The thing that I'm going to be picking up is an item called the Reverse Doll, right here in this screen. The Reverse Doll is an item that if you are equipped with it and you get knocked out in battle, the item will automatically revive you. And if you have HP and TP Surge equipped, full HP and TP, and this item is actually very useful for the Mila story because of the aforementioned Muse fight where you get killed, it's game over. However, if you have the Reverse Doll equipped and have HP and TP Surge on Mila, she will be instantly revived with full HP and TP. Way that you can get a Mila revival in that fight. The alert you just heard. So, after I activate this reactor, when I re-enter the screen, you're going to see enemies.
The enemy has infiltrated the port sector. We need to
Jude's
reinforce
story,
the
the Reverse Doll,
port sector,
is not as important, but I still pick it up for a boss fight later, which you only fight on Jude's side, and it can be difficult for a number of reasons.
Let's return to
But the last item I'm going to be picking up is the Phoenix Ribbon for Elise, which gives her better art defense, and it also gives her fire resistance, which is very good because you're going to see bosses use this really awful move called Sunburst. Unavoidable. It goes across the entire screen, and it will damage to your party, and it will likely inflict burn if it doesn't kill you. And there are quite a few bosses that can use it.
Yeah, on Mila's side, you can sometimes make it through the whole ship without getting the alert whatsoever, or you might get it on the very last screen, in which case it doesn't do anything, but with all the extra items you have to pick up on Jude's side, it's no surprise that you get the alert before the end pretty consistently. It is still better the later you can get it on.
To get back to
Mila, you would
the
like
room, the teleporter room that you used to go back, but that requires a bit of luck.
Yeah. One thing about that Muse 1v1 fight is that she can use Sunburn, and you can't really rely on magic guarding it there, because what happens is that Muse will go into overlimit. During overlimit, she can move around while her spell animation is playing. Like, she's standing still when she casts a spell, but as soon as the spell comes off, she can start moving again. So what she can do is cast Sunburst on you, and then while Sunburst is going, she'll run up to you and do a melee attack. And if you're magic guarding, you're not normal guarding. And that means that you just get decimated by her normal attack while you're trying to magic guard Sunburst, and so that can almost be an unwinnable situation.
It has this death combo called Sharpen Whip, where if you're not guarding, you're probably dead.
Yeah, it really has to miss for you not to be dead. But yeah, so setting up Lilium Orb and stuff for the Gillen and Celsius boss battle. And at this point you're the same level as Mila, let's be real. Like mid or low 40s rather. And not every character has both HP Surge and TP Surge, but they'll have most of them by now.
Actually, everyone has HP Surge, and only Rowen doesn't have TP Surge. And the only reason he doesn't, I don't give it to him, is because he actually doesn't need it. He never runs out of TP.
Yeah, like we said, we were stocking up on those SP skills. Yeah.
He has these skills that basically, if you combo his his spell, like if you use the same spell over and over and like combo with it, he like gets a TP boost, and also the spell costs less TP every time you use it after. So he just ends up never running out. Few fights.
Yeah, you can kind of watch his TP, and even though, well, like we said, whenever you take damage from when you're linked, your partner will get damage to that. Whenever you use TP when you're linked, your partner will cover a small percentage of the TP cost, like a quarter or something. So you can see that basically the only time Rowen even loses significant SP is when he's covering a skill for his partner. Otherwise, fireball spam is just ridiculously cheap.
So
For 300 bar.
these two bosses can link up, and they can also overlimit. Ooh, I got Art Seal. That's nice.
Wait, where did you actually use that Omega Elixir? Or did you sell that?
Well played.
I used it during the Aqua Dragons fight.
Oh right, yeah, of course. I remember. Gotta remember how rough that fight was.
It up on the way to the ice cave. You can only get it on
Yeah.
Jude's story. So I actually used guides on GameFAQs to find where I could get certain items.
Oh yes, the good old game packs.
Yeah, that's what happens when you route JRPGs. You gotta use every resource you can. And when you route any game, really. But especially RPGs and such, where the routing is often way more important than the actual execution.
Yeah, there's
Doesn't matter.
been so many
Gillen's
instances that
ambitions
game
end
packs
here.
has been a lifesaver.
Just keeps.
So I was just when I was just using GameFAQs looking for where I could find as many equipment items as I could that wouldn't be too out of the way. And I managed to find that Omega Elixir for the Aqua Dragons. And now we get a total of 11 cutscene skips.
Yeah, this is
So-
the biggest wall.
Yeah, so this is where Jude and Mila stories take the biggest branching paths. So effectively, in the story wise, Mila sacrifices herself, so everybody ends up dying, and everybody gets really, really depressed afterwards and trying to find their meaning in life because so far they've pretty much just been following Mila around and helping her out. And as this is kind of wrapping up, Alvin's pretty much like emotionally destroyed, just kind of done with life, and Jude's close to it, and Alvin's trying to pick him back up the only way he really knows how. Mila's story, however, ends up being her in the spirit world, and quite literally, when you open up the quest line for where you're supposed to go, it just kind of says journey around and figure it out. And all you do is you just run up to her shrine, fight Musette, and then you progress the story on.
Well, that's too bad.
So here we just had the Jude Alvin fight. It's quick, you can win it, but it's faster to lose. And then we will slowly get everybody together and go on a very long story.
Yeah, long relative to what Mila does. It's not that long, but it
Yeah,
is
it's-
much longer than what Mila has to do.
Yeah,
One nice
I
thing
think
that we can do
casual
more-
wise, I think casual wise, it's like an additional hour, additional like at least like 5 to 8 hours on the story, depending if you just like shotgun straight through it or not.
I've no
But
excuse.
skipping all the cutscenes, what, maybe 15 minutes?
Yeah, so at the highest level, I think from the Japanese times, like, and even just from the times we have right now, like, the difference between Jude and Mila's story is basically just flat out 15 minutes. Jude's story is 15 minutes slower, and most of that is down to this part. Like, there is obviously the extra time invested on the Aqua Dragon, the extra time invested in early game, but then this is what causes the main and the rest of the time lost relative to Mila's story. So instead of one boss battle, you fight one mob battle, or at least one mob battle, it might be, I forget, and then 3 different bosses plus a much extended version of the next boss, which Mila only fights the final phase of. In any case, we'll get to that as we go along. First off, you actually do fight Muse, but it is not 1v1.
You may notice sometimes I don't actually finish developing a character if they only have like a few nodes that I can activate, because it's not really going to make a difference. And so it's just faster to wait until, What? I accidentally talked to the ship guy. Went to another town. Oh, this fight is different story than on Mila's. On Mila's story, I think she has less HP but you have to fight her with Mila alone. Here, she has more HP, but you get a full party of 4.
Yeah, it's still not an easy fight by any means, but it is a kind of more standard boss battle.
Yeah, I think
Different.
When I remember Burn was looking into the values, apparently Mila's Musette has better stats than the final boss does.
Well, the final boss is kind of like the backup to guys, so I guess it would make... It is pretty crazy how strong that Muse is. Yeah, alright, well, there was the first sunburst. She very nearly got it off. It actually came up, like the name of the spell actually displayed up top, but he just barely cancelled it in time for it to not actually appear. So that was a stroke of luck, or skill, whatever you want to say.
Oh.
So that was showing off how 2 people can die from Link, a Link art. I mean, a Link happening. So Rowen died there from being linked up to Elise.
Okay, so Mila is, Muse wasn't dead. Yeah, you just need to take this end a little slower there to make sure that people got experience, although it probably wouldn't have been dead.
Somehow, she didn't seem like her usual
And you can see that it took about a minute, which is actually roughly how long the 1v1 takes as well.
I've had like 45 seconds on that fight. That was not good.
Yeah.
She did not cooperate.
It's not good, but it is roughly the same amount of time as the 1v1 as well. Just a more manageable fight, less punishing than the 1v1 is. Oh well, now you get a second boss battle with your good old buddy, everyone's favourite character.
The one that quite literally already forgot their name, and I said it literally an hour ago.
Good stuff, Jedrith. You've done well to forget Ivar's name.
What can I say? Mondays are a blessing sometimes.
This is the second Ivor boss. This time we have a full party of 4. However, now he has this wyvern to fight with him. But guess what? This wyvern is actually weak to fire, so I can do like 1,500 damage to it.
Yeah. For once, it's actually a boss that is both weak to fire and doesn't have stupid magic defense like Cressa does.
Also, you may notice that Jude is using Aqua Sweep, and the reason I'm doing that is basically to keep Ivor under control. Ideally, I want Jude to target Ivor and not the wyvern. This game has a mechanic where if an enemy is knocked down, they take like a fraction of the damage if they were standing up. But unfortunately, they were.
Oh yeah, and Iva has an overlimit this time and a Mystic Art, which has a small amount of AoE. It's not anything crazy. But it does have AoE.
Ideally, I want Jude to only knock down Ivor so that he doesn't go completely out of control, so that I can target the Wyvern and kill him quickly. And then once the Wyvern is dead, I just stop using Aqua Sweep and go right in with Dreadwings and Fireball.
You got into the
If a boss
stun.
overlimits, you can still use Aqua Sweep and they won't be knocked down.
You got
I
Iva
think
into
it
the
was too
stun, knockdown, darkness combo there.
Can happen too. That's one of the negatives of Dreadwings.
Oh yeah, it can happen with any dark move, but I guess it's probably more likely to happen with Dreadwing. So if an enemy is both stunned and darkness, their stun lasts absolutely forever. And if they also happen to be on the ground, then they get the damage reduction, and that also lasts as long as the stun does. So they could be taking reduced damage for like 10 seconds plus if you're unlucky. Which is a very long time.
It was unfortunately without Aqua Sweep, Ivor can just go completely berserk.
Are you sure we want to keep going?
The only way I can kind of keep him under control because I don't have Mila in the party, so I have less stun lock.
My contemporaries are tending to plants in their gardens while I'm climbing on them like
I
some
think
young
this
buck.
this next boss battle is where they bring back in Alvin, because you don't have him for those first two boss battles. He kind of
Really just go inside the I've never seen this before. The enemy I think, looked like he went inside the hole.
Yeah, he did. But then oh, you need these chests too.
Yeah, I picked up that Platinum Guard so that I can give it to Jude for the final bosses, because otherwise he's going to have the same armor that he started the game with, and that's just going to make those bosses.
So yeah, the Japanese routes for Jude, I think use Alvin for this fight onwards, but like I said, you don't have him for the Ivar fight or for the Mise fight. So you kind of have to spend extra time setting him up, and then he's not actually really all that. So Trance is just going to be using the 4 that we used against the first 2 bosses in this sequence.
That was just unfair. So you get to see how fast Chicken Run is.
Yeah. And also gives an example of how stupid holy bottles can be in this game.
This is one of those very linear areas where it's hard to avoid encounters with or without holy bottles. The equipment item that I'm picking up for Elise, the Platinum Cloak, which I believe is the same item that she gets automatically in Mila's story. It was just conveniently placed on the Neokara Halamont in Jude's story. And it's literally right next to where you have to climb up from the vines. Reason not to pick it up.
Yeah, just to emphasize how good that equipment is that you get if you're playing Mila's story, I'd say that if you're playing casual, unless you deliberately went out of your way to grind like a huge amount, then you won't be able to buy that armor from the shop, those armor and weapons from the shop yet. Like, it will be equipment that's a higher shop level than what you have on your shops, unless you grinded a very huge amount of materials. And not just by a little bit, like maybe by like 10 to 20 shop levels above where you would be in casual. I guess it depends on the player, but it is pretty nuts. So, thankfully, although Agria and Press's linked art is kind of like Sunburst plus Diffusional Drive combined, it does not have the full field effect of Sunburst.
Yeah, that would be crazy.
I mean, it was still pretty rough just because...
Pressa first and have Jude target, because you want Jude to target Agria with Aqua Sweep, since Agria is actually weak to it, and Pressa is weak to fire. The reduced damage you get from Rowen's fireballs is not even that much on Agria because Jude is doing more damage with Aqua Sweep and Rowen is doing less damage with fireballs due to elemental resistances.
And you got the Darkness Stun combo yet again. It's safe, but slow. That's about all we can say about it.
What can happen though is you can get a Darkness Stun with them standing. And they can actually get stun when they're in over limit, if you're really lucky. I've had that happen. We're in marathons, though.
So you can say that that wasn't too bad, and using L would probably not really make it much better.
This is the only other dungeon that might be hard to learn how to navigate in Jude's story, only because it's kind of dark.
But yeah, it's effectively a hop, skip, and jump straight to the next boss. It's not that big.
There is one place where the path diverges, so you have to know which way to turn.
Yeah, but for the most part you're just following the lights, and it's also fairly similar to when you visit this place right at the very end of the game, in both stories. It's just that, instead of being lit from the start, it gets lit up every time you touch a different color of the light balls. Enemy camping in front of the green one. Whatever. Chicken run, still chicken run.
I don't think we're in our world anymore.
Oh
It's
jeez.
actually not a skippable cutscene. You cannot skip this.
Yeah.
They just really wanted to let you know that they like fire, and it's bright. It is unfortunate, though, that the music for this area doesn't actually kick in until next time you visit, because it's really good.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a little too hype for what they're building up to at this point in the game. Those portals, if you talk to those portals, he didn't do that this time, but if you talk to those portals, they can give you like basic supplies back, like apple gels, orange gels, and life bottles, but unless the fights go really poorly, you shouldn't really need them.
Is just a single fight, but for Jude's story is divided into 4 parts, 3 of which are unwinnable. Basically, you just have to damage him until he starts casting. Well, for this phase, you have to damage him until he starts, until a white ring appears around him, which means and as you can see, he's now casting Stop Flow, which basically is an hourglass in the party. And then he starts using Sunburst. Guarding, it will still do the same amount of damage as if you're not, so this attack will bring everyone except Elise down to 1 health. Elise doesn't get brought down to 1 health because she has the Phoenix Ribbon equipped. Then for these next phases, he's eventually going to go into Overlimit and use his Mystic Art. But you actually have to damage him in order to proc the phase changes. I've tried just waiting. Nothing happens. See, now he's going to use... Rowen got killed by the burn.
Thankfully, whenever he ends a phase, you lose the status effects. If you still had the status effects, and you didn't have the Phoenix Ribbon, then your party would just immediately die at the start of the next phase.
Good thing I picked that up.
Also,
so,
now
the Phoenix Ribbon makes it easier.
Also, this is one of the few misses.
What is happening? That he's the one that made left Olympius for dead because Olympius was doing stuff with Spyrexes. He created Mila. Oh, by the way, Mila wasn't Maxwell. He was just a decoy. So basically, Mila to be a decoy for Exodus to target so that they wouldn't know where the real Maxwell is, because if the real Maxwell dies, so does the Schism, which separates Olympius and Riza Maxia. And them separate because he wants to protect Riza Maxi at the expense of Olympius, and Muse,
Well played.
earlier, was the one responsible for protecting it. Rowen has 1 health.
I should mention that there's an edge case here. Oh, sorry, you go on.
Oh,
first.
no, you can go first. It's cool.
Oh, well, there's an edge case where, in those fights, he can cast elemental. He can like do a normal overlimit and cast his Mystic Art, and if you're not careful and you think that that's the one that's going to end the fight, then you can wipe. There you go on now.
So yeah, so Mila's back. So after she died, she lost her human form, and now she's back as a spirit. Effectively, she just kind of comes back at level with the group. It's kind of nice.
Hold on a minute. I have to check something. I may have made a menu mistake. I was supposed to clip this.
But yeah, so based off of what somebody said in chat, yeah, so Mila is actually made off of is named after Maxwell's ex, who also incidentally is the first Kresnik, which is important for back in Xillia 2.
Yeah, you never learn any of this until Xillia. Well, you might learn the Mila thing.
Sunburst! Oh, come on!
Yep, so that's Sunburst.
You don't learn
And
any of the
there it is again.
Until Xillia 2. Fun times.
Basically, this boss has this gimmick, or Maxwell has this gimmick where he changes his weakness and resistance. I believe he always starts. I think he always starts resistant to fire.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, also to mention, Mila has all the summon spirits back.
The only one
and
Dean, because
yeah, Dean is really good. Also, who doesn't like more lag?
Now we got good damage from Rowan's Fireball, Elise's Dreadwings, and Mila's Undine.
And because the game is actually
well, everyone got
well made. Because the Summon Spirits have actually betrayed Maxwell, his Mystic Art changes to Meteor Storm instead of Elemental Meteorites. Like, he doesn't have element control anymore. He still uses it in battle, of course, but his Mystic Art no longer has the 4 Summon Spirits involved.
Well, Mila missed experience, but it's really not a big deal at this point in the game.
I heard a voice.
Yeah. Also, I should mention that the wind form for Maxwell is the one you want, because the arcane art that he uses during the wind form to try and proc his Mystic Art basically never works. Like, it will hit you. It's like that thing where he sends off the wind energy balls. It will hit you, but he will basically never proc his Mystic Art for him. Whereas every other form has an arcane art that can actually proc the Mystic Art. Like, the fire one has a kind of fire sweep. The earth one has an extremely fast earth cutter, which is basically impossible to dodge for the AI. And the water one has, I think it's like an energy drain skill, which is really annoying. So it's actually one of the worst ones to get, even though it's the one that's weak to fire.
So now we're over in Olympus. So pretty much a lot happened at the end of the Maxwell fight. Pretty much Muse ends up betraying everybody and brings in Gaius, who then also brings in the giant cannon from earlier, and they trap Maxwell in it to start draining his power. And then Muse apparently has a hidden sword that's inside of her body, and Gaius uses that and kicks us out of was it Temporal Rift, I believe is where that actual name for the area. And we show up in Olympius. So we're trying to
ever have one single main antagonist throughout the story. It just changes multiple times.
But yeah, so now we're just trying to pretty much figure out a way with the help of some Olympians on how to get back into the Temporal Rift and stop Gaius, because his plan now is to just utterly annihilate all of Olympus to stop them from draining all the mana.
Fair, he's thinking of the good for the good of Riza Maxia.
Yeah, his whole philosophy is the strength of the strong must guide the weak, and so he sees that to protect his people and all the people of Rize Maxia, he has to stop all of Olympus.
Yeah. But all of a sudden we're feeling compassionate for Olympius, and now we're trying to find another method.
Perhaps that cable.
And Olympius basically has electricity, or electricity equivalent, which is powered by the Spirates.
Saw
It
the city,
kills
it's so
spirits.
technologically advanced, but now you'll look at the map here, and
built a city
the whole
this
world
size
just looks
without
like it's
using
dying.
spirit arts.
It's almost frightening.
Look at all these dead trees.
Yeah, you only see a few areas in Xillia 1. Xillia 2 expands on Olympius a lot, although it still reuses basically every area from Xillia 1 as well, so they don't actually take that
What a
many
dreary
areas.
landscape.
They still basically look like this. Desolate
Also,
places.
Olympius is the world of smooth jazz.
Yeah, I mean, the ship was the first sample of that, but the rest is up there as well.
Even the Deadlands have some smooth jazz in it. But right now we're going over to a research facility. A bunch of these scientists, they're experimenting with something, and I forgot if they are being attacked by Gaius or he is threatening to attack the place, and that's why we're running over there.
I can't believe the size
Yeah,
of this
so
facility.
we're gonna run
Everything
through.
in Olympus is
It's
so
once again,
grandiose.
unfortunately, a
It's
small
like a city
corridor
in and of
place. So
itself.
it's easy to get some of these monsters pinned because of the holy ball, and you'll have to run into them. But you can work your way around most of them.
Now I'm
Upcoming
gonna walk
is another boss, resistance to fire. Yeah, sorry, go.
I was just about to say how now I'm basically going to walk up a bunch of endless staircases. But however, the way you know which up on is when a Tipo yells, "I'm still scared." And when you hear that, that means you're on the right level, and then you just enter the right door.
But yeah, you have to now fight a boss which is again resistant to fire, and I think you can probably guess which move we use on it anyway.
I'm not afraid of the dark.
Windblade,
Yeah,
obviously.
Can't miss
We're
the
counting
dark.
on you, Elise.
At this
What
point,
power up?
Undine is also decent damage, and he is also weak to Undine.
I'm still scared.
Hey, get off me. You can't hide there.
And those Bakuras, in this game, I think they're just a big source of the like rotating tiles that run away from you even if you're not using Holy Bottle. In this game, they're just a big source of experience. In Xillia 2, they give you that game's kind of skill point thing, like elementals or whatever. But they're not relevant to the speedrun and evoke game. because they're too annoying to kill?
So this is Volt. So effectively, spirits can come back as Spyruxes, but Volt goes a little insane. So we have to put him down.
Yeah. This game also doesn't have a lightning element. In this game, lightning is the combination of fire and wind, so this thing is weak, or resists fire and wind, and is weak to water and earth. We don't have any significant earth spell, so
Yeah. So
it's all about the water.
they only keep those 4 elements, and then like I think Gaius, even though a lot of his stuff looks like light, it's effectively like a neutral element skill, a non-elemental skill. Same with
No, light is another element.
Storm. Oh, it
It's
isn't
actually,
there?
yeah, it's just that lightning and ice aren't elements. Ice is water and earth, and lightning is fire and wind, but otherwise it's the same elements as the other games, like 6 instead of 8.
Okay, we finally
But
stopped it.
he's not a hard boss at all, as you have just had demonstrated.
All the electric shocks may have helped my blood circulation.
Yes.
That being said, this is one of the hardest, if not the hardest boss in Xillia 2, and you find it really close to the start of the game as well.
Heck yeah, Leia.
Heck yeah! Fruity noodles conquer all!
Leia, if I may
Yeah,
be so bold,
and
you have a
he's
piece of
finally
seed
changed off the
and a
XP
watermelon
food.
seed stuck
At this
in
point,
your
you're
mix.
over-leveled enough, and the XP food only gets you like 1 or 2 more levels. So what you do is you change over to this fruit yakisoba that you actually just get straight up given by, I think it's Leia's mom or Leia's dad at the family inn.
Look!
Yeah.
Something green
Not to mention
for
that you're so
once.
high level
Yeah,
now that now
But I wouldn't
each
expect
level
to see
only
a big
gives you like
forest
maybe
anytime soon.
or 3 GP, and eventually if you get really high, they start only giving you 1 GP per level.
Yeah.
Kind of scales.
Well, what the fruit yakisoba does, apart from being heck yeah fruity noodles for all, it gives you 25% in every stat, which is pretty useful. It's less useful than levels are up until this point, because you can just get those same stats and more by being over-leveled. But at this point, you have finally reached the point where it's worth to start just going for the stats instead.
Now we've learned of an alternative method to Gaius's plan, and that is to use Spyrites to restore Olympius without killing spirits. Try and convince Gaius, right? But the only way
Yeah.
Gaius can be convinced is through sheer force in battle.
Yeah, at this point, Spyrax is still very experimental, even for like a new technology, and Gaius, well, not only is he hard to convince with words to begin with, he's also very skeptical about such a new thing, and even in Xillia 2, which is like a year later, I think, they are still nowhere close to being like a finished concept. So
I don't understand.
you can tell that
The spirit fossil came off.
it's
How is
going to
she
take
able-
some effort to make Gaius accept our plan.
Yeah. I think even Xillia 2 Gaius is still reserved about the research and prepared for the worst.
Yeah. He is still ready to revert to killing all of Olympius at any moment, basically. You now get 3 kind of reflection scenes. Not that we set them, but there's like reflection scenes where the characters basically decide if they want to fight Gaius or not. Of course, they all end up saying that they will, but there is actual doubt in some of their minds about whether they should. It would be kind of amusing if they decided not to. Like, oh, you don't get a lease for the final dungeon, by the way. She decided no.
Yeah, but I think when I was going through it, the one that impacted me the most was Alvin, because Alvin even sits there and is like, we kind of deserve this.
I was just trying to have to say is that you can actually skip that last cutscene when the in music plays. It's kind of funny. Alright, so now we're heading into the final dungeon.
There's a few OP items laying around, like Omega Elixirs and Hourglasses.
There's an Omega
kind of
Elixir right here. Oh, wow. I think because Mila missed experience on that Maxwell fight, I wasn't able to,
used to it.
Oh, wow. That's surprising. I think you'll definitely be fine after them. Because in Fairy and Jude's, you're actually more overleveled than Mila now. It's only by like 1 level, but you are more overleveled than Mila by this point in the game.
So here's Wingle. He's pretty much the same as he's always been, just hits harder and has more HP. As well as
you only have to fight him this time.
Yeah, only have to fight him, but he more willing to not willing, but more likely to trigger his Mystic Card.
Yeah, he can still absorb wind stuff until setting up that way, but he doesn't actually use that much. So,
that was nice stun.
Oh yeah, you actually got to stand. No, it wasn't a standing up target. Just standing up was a stun, but still pretty good. And there's a pretty typical over in it. And he does have some spells. Again, that one got cancelled just before it came out, but he can use Cyclone. He can also use Sunburst, although it's extremely rare. But it has happened in PT attempts to various people before, where they got kind of messed up by a Sunburst out of Wingle.
Though that too was a very solid fight.
Yeah. Can be better, can be worse. There's Wingle in a nutshell. He can be very inconsistent. So, final dungeon, and unfortunately this is yet another place where Jude gets the short end of the stick, although it isn't like a huge difference, but...
Yeah, so we... Yeah. Sorry.
You fight one of the two, like you fight the two final bosses, Gaius and Muse at the end, but before that you fight one of the two as a fight with only Jude and Mila, and it depends on which story, which one you fight, and it's the one most closely related to your main character, so Mila obviously gets Muse, which means Jude gets to fight Gaius.
Muse is... I think she's more likely to kill you. However, she happens to be weak to light, which makes the fight pretty manageable, as long as she doesn't troll. Gaius, however, is resistant to light and has no elemental weakness at all. Weakness to dark only in the final boss. I mean, that doesn't really matter because we have a lease to do dark elemental damage, but even if he had dark weakness in this fight, it wouldn't matter because we have nothing that does dark elemental damage.
Very few things even do dark elemental damage outside of Elise and like a very small subset of mobs. Rowen has nothing for it. Well, no one apart from Elise in the whole party has anything for dark. Until Xillia 2, when they started distributing the elements a bit more.
Yeah, so as y'all have noticed now, we've gotten separated from the rest of the group again, and just only met back up with Mila. So that's gonna be how it is until we get into the final boss.
yeah, 2 more battles to go, and they are... Neither of them is easy, neither of them you would say is the hardest battle in the game either. But they are something that you can't just overlook either. And you can buy a bunch more OP Link stat boosting skills before you head in. Yes, first up, the aforementioned 1v2 against Gaia. At this point, everyone has their arcane art. Haven't really been using them, but you have Jude's ability called Savage Roar, which is a very strong melee attack with knockdown. So you'll be using a lot of that, although...
And I'll be using a few link arts as well.
Yeah, I mean you use link art whenever you can, and Savage Roar does build up a decent amount of link gauge as well.
Snowgale actually still does quite a bit of damage despite being a very early link art.
For single target link arts, it's definitely one of them. I mean, it can hit AoE of course, but it is mainly target. At this point, yeah, Maxwell took a few more life bottles than you'd like, so you're kind of reliant on not dying too much and or using the more OP items that you get in this dungeon to recover from mishaps. It's a manageable situation, but if the final boss fight goes badly, then could end up having issues.
I think I had that reverse doll. It doesn't matter, I think I'm dead.
Oh yes, guys, this card. It's actually really cool.
This fight only lowers you to 1 HP and confuses you. In the next fight, it always kills you.
A lot of Mystic Arts won't outright kill you. Absolute Domination in the final boss fight is actually one of the only ones that can kill you. Although, yeah, there are a few more. But there are a decent chunk of them that can only put you at 1 HP. So yeah, so there's just a retry. Hopefully this time you can get through without using the hourglass, because that is useful to have on the final boss fight, but I mean, if you're forced to use it here, then you use it here.
Any truth to your words?
I also don't have my extra elixir because I had to use it on a boss earlier to give Jude experience.
Yes. There are like 2 extra elixirs you can get by taking a short detour, but don't know whether that's really ever worth it.
There's actually an extra elixir you can pick up in the Sapstrat Deepwood.
Yeah, that's the ones I was talking about. It's 2 of them, apparently. And that's the one that Fel basically recommended getting, not just for Jude's story, but for Mila as well.
Oh,
but I'd say...
my luck! Alright, here's the Mystic Art.
Yeah. If you use your Mystic Art, you can cancel out both your... I mean, it ends your over limit, but it also ends his at the same time. But his was probably already over regardless. It's just nice to get some more safe damage, even if it's slow damage. Oh my god.
That was way too close.
Oh. Gaius, why?
At least the... Gosh, that was just close.
Well, this time the hourglass has been preserved. So, the final boss shouldn't be too bad, although 3 life bottles is a little...
I don't have my reverse.
So the only 2 big things that you have to worry about the final boss is Muse can actually steal stuff from you and then use it. B, she gets one free revive from a skill called Angel Recall that she has. So you have to use that twice.
So the way the fight is designed is it works on a timer where you start with Jude and Muse, and as the fight goes on, just thinking of picking up that Omega Elixir, but I think we're fine. Probably should have just picked it up. But anyways, as the fight goes on, your other party members will join, and the order in which they join depends on how much they've linked with the protagonist that you chose. So in this case, they've linked with Jude.
Who was that? You cut out a little bit.
Oh, Jude. Since he's the protagonist, the order in which they join the fight depends on how much time they spent linked with Jude.
Okay.
Yeah, so in a Mila run where Muse isn't all that challenging, what you would do is you would basically preserve your link bar for the start of this fight, and you would try and burst down Muse, like Muse's first life using the overlimit. Obviously, when you're fighting Gaius, you don't always have that luxury of being able to save resources like that. So he's just trying to do as much damage as possible with the Jude and Mila combo before Rowen shows up, and then probably swap to Rowen.
Also, Muse can magic guard if she wants to.
Yeah, so there's Muse using item, the strong trait, she has unlimited of those.
Whenever she guards, she actually heals. So you do not want to attack her when she's guarding, because she'll like absorb the damage.
Yeah. She has quite a few healing mechanics, not to mention when they link, like the percent damage she takes, some of it is transferred to Gaius, and he has a much larger HP bar, so she can end up healing quite a bit when she links to Gaius. And stall around for much longer.
Before Alvin even shows up, but I don't think that's happening.
Yeah.
Also, if you kill Gaius first before Muse, she'll just revive him.
Can she?
I always target Muse first anyway.
Yeah, she throws a life bottle on him, so effectively he gets a free revive as well. Pretty much you have to defeat one of them twice.
Yeah, Muse went into overlimit. Her Mr. Cart can't kill, but it doesn't flex status, so
that move,
if you get really unlucky...
If you hit somebody with it, actually reduces your TP to 0.
Well, yeah, it's the... what's it called again? It's like just energy drain or whatever, and it doesn't reduce you to 0, but it may as well because you get flinched, and every time you lose like a quarter of your TP, so generally you will go all the way down to 0. It's just not completely instant.
So you might have saw there, some Muse did get down, then Angel Recall popped and she's right back up. But she doesn't come back up at full HP, it's like a fourth, I think.
Yeah, like 4th or 5th. But even though we've been hitting Muse pretty much the whole time, Gaius is actually under half HP already, just because they've been linked quite a while and the whole link damage share thing.
You mentioned that when one of these bosses over limits, you really don't want to be linked. Because if one of them gets hit by that, the other gets confused.
Yep. And like I said before, Absolute Domination will actually just kill the character in this fight. And you probably got a good time for the Omega Elixir here, huh?
I already used it.
Oh, you already got it. And now Alvin comes in and does very slightly more damage. Well, okay. In Mila's story, where he's still effectively level 7, he does like 500 damage total. In this story, he did like maybe 2,000 or something. Still nothing to write home about.
No, I think I'm out of life bottles.
Yeah, you probably are.
Let's see if we can finish. Yeah, I got nothing.
Yeah. I don't want to say you should be okay, but you've got a decent still. Particularly, yeah, if you can keep Leia alive.
The burn! Alright.
Yeah, and Leia's passing redirect, so you're okay.
Nice.
Oh no, that was sharpness, but whatever. It's still fine, probably. Yep.
Is it over?
Yes, no doubt about it.
Victory's ours.
We did it!
Mila!
Yes.
Let me
it's
know when time
finally
happens.
over.
Oh, that was time already.
Oh, it was?
Called it.
I didn't hear it, sorry.
I mean, yeah, you got it within like 4 seconds in the end because of the delay, so it wasn't too bad.
Maxwell!
My final time.
Well, I hit it a little bit late, but I have it at 3:39:39, so it's
all
probably a
gone.
low
I've lost everything.
3:39:30-ish.
Your vision of the future offers nothing
I did
but
pause and
suffering to
such
the
while you were
people,
doing tech stuff, so...
whether
You did pause the
spy rats
timer,
are
alright.
perfected or not.
Okay.
Even if we unite the two worlds,
When we had microphone
it is
problems and
pure
we were trying to fix
fantasy
it.
to think that they will cooperate with one
Yeah.
another.
But that run could have gone better. But I guess for a marathon, I guess it's okay.
Still, Mila never stopped believing.
There's only the one retry, right? To Gaius right at the very end.
There were
Or
two.
am I
I
forgetting one?
got on a fight in Fort Gandala.
Oh yeah,
What
that
does any of
Fort
that matter
Gandala
now?
one. Yeah, completely forgot that. Yeah.
I may appear to be
So,
talking tough now,
2
but I
retries
was
in a
scared witless throughout this
marathon
entire
run of
journey.
Jude is not bad at all.
I'm still just a small, frail human. But you know what? I will get
I
strong.
feel like it's a really good showing of Jude, to be honest, for one of the first Jude marathon runs.
Believe in me.
And like the second completed Jude run on stream for the last
struggle to grow more for the
however many years. I think there may have been like one person that ran Jude back in the RPG Olympic run days, but I think they ran it on easy difficulty as well. And that run is gone as well. This Trance was the first one to upload a Jude run at all to the speedrun.com leaderboards.
Actually got a Jude PB a few days ago.
Oh, okay, you did get another PB.
Forced to rise again.
I thought you'd only got the 330, but if you got another one, that's cool.
I got a 328. Haven't submitted it yet. Was kind of hoping that I would just get another PB.
You won't have to do anything.
Music.
Yeah, I believe this is the first time a Tales of game has ever been featured on the GDQ channel.
Wouldn't be sure. Yeah.
I can check.
We just need to get it into one of the major marathons.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not saying any Tales of on GDQ VODs.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, if we focus
I
on the
have
shorter
decided to
games and
become
keep
Maxwell.
whipping them into shape with the runs and such,
So
then
that was your plan.
I think there's a chance, but
Now, if you so desire,
gotta keep grinding really.
you may use the schism's mana to become human again.
I see.
Like to at least get this back into Limit Break at some point.
Wait.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening.
Specifically this category.
Jude, I'm afraid this is farewell.
Finally give Jude his time in the
Things
sun.
were always intertwined in mysterious ways. Thank you for everything.
So I think we know what our raid message will be after this stream, though. It'll definitely have to be Fireball.
Let's do
I'm
it.
sorry for all the times I was weak. But now, I think I'm going to be just fine.
Mila! Elise wants you to know that she loves you tons! Of course I do too! Will we be able to see each other again?
It has been a pleasure.
What the hell is this? You never told us!
I'm ready.
Yeah, thank you all for watching. Wasn't expecting to see Tales get that much love in the GDQ community, but it seems that we got a lot of fans here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and running for us, Trance. And of course, Gedrith and to Bomb Stew for helping complicate.
My pleasure.
Do you have shoutouts you'd like to do while the ending is wrapping up here?
Okay, well, as I mentioned earlier, the RPG Valkyries are hosting their speedrun Ragnarok marathon this week, which is RPGs as well as games from other genres. So we'll be hosting them after this run. So be sure to check them out this week. The month on the RPG Limit Break channel, we have the Questing for Glory marathon, which will solely feature RPGs for a whole week. You should definitely check that out as well. Thank you all for having me on your channel. It's been an honor.
Yep.
It's the biggest opportunity I've ever had as a streamer.
I will be okay.
Yep, and if you like Tales of, once a year in February, maybe March, depending on what happens next year, we run Tales of marathons to celebrate all the Tales of games. We have a weekend-long speedrun marathon that all of us have participated in at this point. And yeah, probably more information will be coming out about it next month. It'll be on the RPG Limit Breaks channel, so just keep an eye on that to see when it's going to be.
Yeah, there'll probably be a rerun of this run in that, honestly.
Yep.
But we'll have to wait and see.
I got your letter, but I can't say that I have very much to report. What a big knucklehead. Drinks are on you now. Well, maybe one thing. A friend invited me to start a business with him.
How much longer does this ending go?
It goes a bit. Do you want to just wait till the credits come?
Yeah, how long until the credits?
I don't know, maybe not even a minute, actually.
Okay, yeah. We'll probably start signing out when the credits start then. And then toss everybody over to Speedrun Ragnarok. Thank you everybody who tuned in.
I'm no longer pursuing nursing.
We'll be wrapping up here shortly, but you stick around. We will be rating Speedrun Ragnarok after this. As I said, they're doing stuff all week, and they're supporting a good cause that's a pretty decent tie-in with Disability Awareness Month, honestly.
Are you okay there, Leia?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Dad.
You two, quit goofing around!
Yes, ma'am!
But I do have a dream now.
I'm sorry I sat on the street, honey.
I want to settle down and start a family that cares for each other, just like Mom and Dad.
I actually forgot that she said that was her plans. And then she later on goes and becomes a reporter.
And maybe it was a little bit more than a minute. But it's almost over.
Yeah, it's fine.
Ellie, your friends are here. Okay, I'm coming.
Watching the end sequence in RPGs is kind of a marathon tradition anyway, when possible.
I'm going to the same school that Trisal graduated from. So, what do you think of him? I even made some friends there. But I'm still not very comfortable when it comes to talking. You're so funny, Elise. Even so, I still love being able to spend time with them.
I do like in this end sequence, you can tell just by the outfits which one of them were main characters if you weren't paying attention.
The promise we made to him becomes a reality. For my part, I am enjoying my new life here. Very well then, that concludes today's lesson. This is what I was meant to do.
Okay, so thanks everybody for tuning in. Just as a quick reminder, if you would like to participate in Disability Awareness Month, the submissions are still open. You can type !Disability Month in chat. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for Random Number Generator at 8 p.m. Eastern with Skybills. They're going to be going over some randomizer stuff. And, of course, Once again, Hotfix is funded in part thanks to subscriptions and bits. So thank you everybody who tuned in. We'd appreciate a lot if you consider subscribing. But one final thank you to Transkina, Gedrith, and Dabomstew for showing off this run for us today. We are going to raid the RPG Valkyries because they've got a week-long marathon going on. So go give them some love. If you want to do a raid message, I suggest Fireball because we had a lot of Fireball for the show. But we'll see you tomorrow for our random number generation.